And I'm seeing that we have 17 attendees in the public. And I guess at this time, if anybody wants to make a public comment, please raise your hand. I typically read the names of the people that I can see as attendees at this time. So I'll start with that. And while I'm doing that, again, people who want to make a public comment, please raise your hand. I will remind you that public comments at this time should be about things that are not showing up later on our agenda. So we have Letitia LaFollette, Barry Roberts, Brad Hutchinson, Carol Lewis, Claire Bertrand, Gabrielle, Gail Flood, John Kuhn, Jonathan Salvon, Kenneth Roberts, Kent Farber, Pam Rooney, Patrick Cobbs, Philip Henry, Ruoki Zong, Sharon Povinelli, and Tom Reedy. All right, so I see one hand. Pam, if you could bring Letitia LaFollette in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Welcome, Letitia. Please give us your name and your street address, and you have 3 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you. My name is Letitia LaFollette. I live at 18 Dana Street. I've lived at Dana Street for 35 years. And I wanted to comment on, I'm sorry, when I came into the meeting, I couldn't see the agenda, but I wanted to comment on the site plan review of the Barry Roberts building in the old Hastings building.
Okay, so that is going to be on our agenda, probably
So I shouldn't comment on that.
next item.
Okay.
So I will ask you to hold your comment on that.
Okay, so but I'll have a chance to talk later?
You will.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
All right. Are there any other members of the public that would like to make a comment? Okay, so I guess I don't see any hands, so we will assume there are no further public comments this evening and move on. Time now is 6:43. And we will go on to the third item on the agenda, the joint public hearing, site plan review and special permit. So this is a joint public hearing to request a site plan review approval under section 3.325 of the zoning bylaw to redevelop a mixed-use building, including rehabilitating the existing mercantile building, also called the Hastings building, removing a rear L of that building and the adjacent brown building, and constructing a new 5-story residential building at the rear of the site. The project to contain 22 dwelling units in combination with ground floor retail, commercial space, and a connecting structure containing a lobby, an elevator, and a stair, and to request a special permit in accordance with section 9.22 of the zoning bylaw to allow a reduction in non-conforming lot coverage from 100% to 97%, and to relocate the non-conforming retaining wall and section and a special permit in accordance with section 515.171 of the zoning bylaw to allow payment in lieu of affordable units. Map 14A, parcel 250 and 281 in the BG, TC and DR and MPD zoning district. So this is all, I guess I should have started with the subject, which is the SPR 2024-05 and SPP 2024-04, all at South Pleasant Street LLC, located at 45 and 55 South Pleasant Street. Okay, so it looks like we've brought in Tom Reedy, John Kuhn, and Barry Roberts to represent this project. Welcome, gentlemen, and I don't know which of you wants to give us the start, but you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Tom Reedy, attorney with Bacon Wilson out of Amherst, here on behalf of South Pleasant Street LLC. And it's, as you noted, application for site plan approval for a mixed-use development at 4555 South Pleasant Street. We are also asking for only 2 of those 3 special permits. We're asking for essentially a finding on the lot coverage. So the lot is currently 100% covered. We are looking to reduce that to 97%, 95% what's allowed in that zoning district. So even though we're making it better, we're not achieving that 95%. And so we need a finding from the board that the change, the reduction is, quote, not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing nonconformity, which obviously we would suggest that you can make that finding. And we're also asking for a special permit to allow the payment of $1,124,400 in lieu of providing 3 affordable units within the building. The last special permit that was mentioned was the relocation of that retaining wall. Barry's decided not to relocate that retaining wall, so we no longer need any relief from the rear yard setback for that relocation. And so with me this evening, I've got John Kuhn, architect emeritus from Kuhn Riddle Architects, who's going to probably start us off, give a little bit of the background and genesis of this project. Pam, we also have Jonathan Salvon in the audience if you want to bring him on as a panelist. So hopefully there's a smooth transition between John and Jonathan. We also have Phil Henry in the audience. He can join to answer any questions. He's the site engineer. So if the board has any questions about drainage, accessibility, any site related comments, he's the one to answer. And then obviously Barry Roberts is here as well, the developer. And so I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to let John, let me see, take it away from here. John, direct me as you will, and I can hopefully drive the bus.
John, you are muted.
You're muted.
There we go. I'll start over again. Good evening, Planning Board. It's a pleasure to be here, and we appreciate this opportunity to present this project. I thought what we would do is I will give a brief sort of a history of a little bit of a brief history of the building and then of the project itself. And there is an aerial photograph or rendering that I think is probably helpful for telling the story here. I think you can all locate the Hastings building there. This section of Amherst along South Pleasant Street is called Merchants Row. Most of it was designed by an architect named William Fennell Pratt, who was very renowned in the area. He designed Northampton City Hall, the Dickinson House, the Hills House, and most of these commercial buildings, as well as many of the beautiful buildings downtown Northampton. These were all built in the late 19th century, 1879 to 1890 or so. In 1914, Asa J. Hastings opened Hastings store on South Pleasant Street, not at the present location, but that was opened in 1914. So the business was Hastings was in business for 108 years. In 1937, he moved it into the present location at 45 South Pleasant Street, where it was until 2022. He passed the business along to his son, Don Hastings, and he and his wife, Phyllis, ran it for many years. Don was, interestingly enough, an alum of Amherst College, lived on North Prospect Street. And I remember when we first moved to town, I used to see he and Phyllis walking to Hastings many mornings. Don and Phyllis eventually turned the store over to their son, David, who was married to Mary Broll. David unfortunately died in an accident in 1997, and Mary took over the store. In 1988, Sharon Povinelli, who had graduated from UMass, also started working at Hastings. And so when David passed away, Mary and Sharon took over the running of Hastings, and they own the building today. And as you all know, they They ran it until the June of 2022, at which time they had to close it, which is kind of, I think everybody has felt the passing of Hastings. And this is a valuable piece of real estate. It's their legacy in many ways. And so they have been wondering what to do with the building. Early last year, they asked me to come in and take a look at it, and discuss what they might do with the upper floors, and particularly the L to the rear. Before I jump into that, however, I think I should also point out the Brown Building, which is at 55 South Pleasant Street, right there. Was also a historic building at some point in time, but has probably undergone so many changes over the years that there's nothing of any note left there. That building was a bookstore that many of you may remember, the Jeffrey Amherst bookstore, which I believe opened in 1937. Its last owners were Joy and Howard Gersten, and they closed the bookstore in 2009. While it's had a couple of tenants upstairs, the first floor tenancy has been vacant for 15 years. So that building comes into play in the discussion here. So I met Mary and Sharon early last year to look at what might be done with the building. And the L in the back, they were interested in maybe putting a couple of apartments. But I was struck by two things. One was that it was going to be very expensive, especially given today's codes, particularly energy codes, to convert that into apartments and for a reasonable amount of money. And secondly, I guess I'd always seen the parcel back there, but as you can see on the map to the right there, that kind of highlighted gray space is the parcel. And if you take off the L and you take down the Brown Building, the existing building is about a quarter of the site. So it really is a site that's fairly large and in many ways underutilized. So I suggested that we should really look at building a building behind the existing building, restore the building that is there, the historic structure itself. And in that conversation, Barry Roberts got involved and suggested that perhaps we should look at seeing if the building, the Brown Building at 55 could be purchased. And that did take place. And that opened up a lot of different possibilities. As we got into the design of this, the zoning allows a 5-story building at 55 feet. One of the problems with that is that a 5-story building at that, which is approximately 11 feet per floor, and a building like the existing Hastings, which has floor-to-floor heights that are 12 or 13 feet, the two buildings don't line up. So what made sense was to try to create a connection between the new building and the old building that would allow for those differences in floor heights. The first thought was really to look at perhaps expanding the existing building over where 55 South Pleasant is now. But in reality, that didn't really allow for that much additional square footage. It was going to be expensive to add there. And what made the most sense was to clear that building out and create a nice space between the Brody Building to the south and 45 South Pleasant to the north. And if we go, I guess, to the next slide, I think you see this is a good site plan. So here you can see in the upper right-hand corner, the existing Hastings building. To the south of that, there you go, that's 55. And then up there to the left is the existing L to the back of it, which was 3 stories, but also didn't line up with the existing building. So our thoughts were to demolish these 2 buildings. A demolition permit was applied for and a demolition delay of 6 months was put on both structures, and that 6 months will be up in April. If you go to the next slide, I think you see the basic partie here, which was to construct a building, setting it back a little over 10 feet on all sides, and connecting it with a building that, or a section, a connector that allows for elevators, stairways, entries, and that kind of thing. And the space between the two buildings, and Jonathan will get into the details of this design, but allowed for us to maintain vehicular access, one-way access that's there now, pedestrian access, transformer, bike racks, entries, and that type of thing. So in the end, it made more sense to be respectful of the existing building, both the east facade toward the common, but also the south facade, and push all the new structure to the rear. So I did some drawings with Marion, Sharon, and Barry, and worked through some concepts, and over the summer, and then in the early fall, this was turned over to Jonathan Salvon at Kuhn Riddle to develop what you'll see now. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a background as how the design came to be. And Jonathan, if you want, I'll plug in here and there as needed, but if you want to take it from here, you can begin to talk about the more details about the design.
Sure. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of walk around or go around the building, you know, a little bit in the next slide that with a little bit more detail. We're going to look at some exterior views, and then we'll get into a little bit of the organization of the building and the inside, which I think will kind of tie back somewhat to what John was talking about with this notion of a kind of block in the back, a block in the front, and a connector piece. I should make sure that now I'm prattling on, that folks can't actually hear me. The last time I was at a meeting, I was sounding like a chicken, apparently. So this next slide is very similar to what John was just showing you, but with a little bit of color to kind of differentiate some of the different pieces. So again, at that right-hand side front, you know, along South Pleasant Street is the existing Hastings building. Due south of that, or down on the page, is that kind of new entry plaza that we've been talking about, which takes you, you know, an accessible path from the sidewalk at the street up to the front door, which will be in this connector part of the building, which will serve as the vertical circulation for both parts of the building. The front part of the Hastings building, the first floor of the Hastings building, is going to continue to be a mercantile space. If folks have seen the papers, I'm sure you know that you know the Amherst College store is coming into this space. The rear first floor will be amenity space, and we'll have a more detailed plan of that coming up in a little while. But that's all going to be related to the residential uses. So the front portion remains mercantile. The rear portion is amenity and support space for the residential spaces on all the floors above this in both the existing building and the new building. Just to kind of continue to walk around the site a little bit here, is shown in that kind of light gray, as John was saying, along the south side is the driveway. It's really the same width driveway that there is today. There just isn't a building right up against the edge of it for the first third or half. And then continuing north and then back east is going to be new hardscape paving that will replace the asphalt that's there today. That'll get all chewed up during the process of construction. At the southwest corner of our new building, there will be 2 pull-in spaces to provide an accessible parking place and a parking place for whether it's a drop off, someone delivering a package or something like that. Just one more convenient space. We're not obviously going to be able to meet the parking demands of potential residents on this site given its constraints. I think we can move to the next slide. So this sort of reproduces in the upper left here, we have the same image that we had on our cover, but calling out some of what we're doing. Obviously the yellow Hastings building remains in the front. We're taking the that paint color and extending it around the south side of the building to kind of highlight the historic piece, especially once that brown building comes down. It probably makes sense to kind of make a cohesive whole out of it. Behind that, you can see the vertical, what's actually a stair tower and lobby space at each floor. The elevator is actually tucked deeper into the connector, but we'll get to that in a moment. You can see we're trying to create some seating opportunities and bicycle locations in this front plaza. We have a covered walkway, and you get a good comparison of kind of the before and after here. It's a relatively narrow space, but we feel like placing the main mass of the new building at the back kind of draws your eye in and does a great job of kind of reducing the scale of what is a 5-story building. Let's move to the next slide. This is a view. These are some views from the south, but we also have tucked in the upper right here some examples of the materials we're going to be using. The base all the way around the building will be a brick masonry, except at that tower. And then the upper levels will be a combination of different colors and different textures of a metal panel system. And again, on that, the front part of the site where the Hastings building is, we're going to be adding some additional windows where the brown building is now to provide better, natural light into the apartments that will be created at that level. I think we can move on, and feel free to interrupt me with questions if folks want. I don't want to lose it, folks to have to, lose thought as we're moving around the building. On the upper right is a view from the cinema parking lot.
Jonathan, you have your first question. Bruce?
Oh, Bruce.
Jonathan, one of the questions that we raised at some point, I think, is the rooftop mechanicals. I think you've got screening, but these are excellent images to point out. I particularly, for example, was interested from the Fleet or Bank of America parking lot here in the upper right. It looks like you can't see much on the roof from there. These other rooftop, are they screen mechanicals?
Yeah, let me point them out. So if we look at the what we're calling the west elevation here, the first that first sloped object you see, that's actually the stair access to the roof. Then the long linear piece, that is the screening. So that is the screening that we're providing for the rooftop mechanical equipment. A page or two down, we actually have a section through it, but I think we're proposing something that's either 4, 6, or 5 feet high. And then that last piece, that's really the parapet of the tower at the front. And again, when you look at it from the north, you can kind of see the access stair and then the longer side of the space, or the screening for the mechanical equipment. And these obviously these are computer renderings and computer views, but we have in fact modeled the size of the screen on the roof, so that view that you're seeing from the cinema parking lot, we feel accurately depicts the fact you won't really even see the screening, never mind the equipment from that side of the building.
And just so we're clear here, the top two images are west elevations. West elevations. The one on the left here, where your arrow is a clinical elevation. So
Yes.
you see the mechanicals up on the top there, but the one on the right, as I understand it, is a perspective rendering, and probably because the mechanicals are set back, you don't actually see them. So although what we see here in the west elevation shows very clearly mechanicals, it's, if I'm understanding it correctly, you won't actually see them from the ground unless you get
back quite far.
If you get back to Williamsburg or something like that.
Maybe not quite that far.
Well,
if
downhill
we roll
all the way to Hadley, that's the point.
Yeah. If we scroll back a page, just so that we finish this topic before we get too far, again, you have that flat on view down at the bottom of the page. That shows the screening. You can actually see the little bit of the door when it comes to the kind of rooftop access. But again, from the ground, you'd have to be back a significant distance to see it. And if we go back to the prior slide, a little bit more, there we go. You can just barely make out a tiny little piece of the, and that's actually the overrun on the elevator in that case. And so it'll be difficult to see the screening, never mind the equipment.
Good. I thought that would be the case, and I thought this was a good opportunity to make that very clear to everybody.
All right, thanks, Bruce. Johanna, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. Dangerous to open it up for questions this early. But could you go to the next slide, the A6? Perfect. I'm just trying to, I worked in the Hastings building for about 5 years, so have a lot spent, I'm just trying to understand what's happening on this view 1. So the white building kind of block that's where Laughing Dog is now.
Yes, that's where the bicycle shop is. Yes, exactly.
And then what is the grayish blue blob to the left?
That is, I'm not sure. John might recall what it's called, but it's on the neighboring site.
It's Bill Gillen's building.
Yep, the white one. Okay.
Yep. I wasn't sure if that building had a name.
And the retaining wall is there, so the cars
Yeah.
are pulled up to it.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Helpful.
All right.
So if we scroll back down, oh, Bruce, do you have another question, or you still have your hand up? Sorry, Mr. Chair, I think I just should have let you ask that question.
Well, I know Bruce well enough to know that's a legacy. Go ahead, Jonathan.
So I think this is where we were. I think we've touched on much of it, but again, you can see in these views that we're bringing that brick band around, and we're trying to break up the kind of facades here by grouping some of the windows together. Instead of just having lots of little punched openings, we're using trim and different textures of the metal siding to create some larger scale form and order on the facades. Let's move down one more. So we have some detailed views of the entry plaza. I'm going to start at view 1. You can see we have our signage, and tucked behind the signage is the start of the ramp that goes under that canopy towards the front door. You can make out a little bit of the bench and the bike rack as well there, and the 3 different planting beds, which we'll touch on a little bit more. Moving down on the page to kind of a view from above with the canopy trimmed off. Again, you can see the pathway of the ramp, that front bed and sign location, the larger, longer planting area that has some evergreen plantings to screen the transformer, and then a last planter by the building as well. So we're proposing, as part of this project, that obviously the Amherst College store is going to go to the DRB with their own signage. I don't know that they've put that application in yet or not, but as part of this project, there's going to be 2 pieces of signage that we're suggesting. One is kind of a building marker for the residential piece. That's the brick sign with the 55 letters on it, and then as a kind of a historic acknowledgement of the century-long presence of Hastings in the building, we're adding Hastings 1914 in the upper part of the front elevation. I probably should have pointed that out when we were a little further back, but if folks want us to scroll back, we can do that and show that at some point. Let's move on.
Jonathan,
yep.
Was the historical commission okay with your naming or marking the building in that way?
I'm going to ask Tom to draw on his memory on that one.
There was, I don't know that we showed them this rendering. I think we were just talking about the existing buildings that were coming down. So we have not asked them whether or not they're okay with it. We deferred to the building owners, and they were okay with it. So that's why it's up there.
Yeah, I don't think that had been developed yet, but it was reviewed by the design review board.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Let's move down to the next sheets. So in a little bit more detail, this is kind of a combination of things. This does have some of the detail on the species of the plants, which unfortunately, at least on my screen, I can't read, but I can describe them if necessary. But I think the piece that's probably more important for kind of understanding the building is the notion of how the new piece and the existing building kind of work together. So let's just scroll out a little bit, and if folks want to talk about the plantings, we can return to that. But again, on the right side of the page, we have the existing bookstore. And at the left side, we have the block of the new building. And in between, there's this lobby space, an elevator core. And as I was describing earlier, the rest of this floor at the back is either amenity space or support space for the residential uses above. And so there's a bike storage room, a trash room, some small amount of tenant storage, got a laundry, and then we have our second egress.
And what do you mean by tenant amenity space?
So it's sort of thought of as kind of a lounge space. There'd probably be some soft seating in there. It's a lot of the newer multifamily residential buildings have them. Sometimes they do gyms. I don't think that would be the case here, but the full use of that space has not been fully programmed out yet.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Could it potentially be commercial?
No, so this is going to be residential space. In Ms. Brestrup's development application report, she asked about meeting the mixed use definition. And Jonathan, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or if you have the numbers in front of you, but this bookstore and its commercial nature is sufficient and meets that 30% for the entirety of what you have here. So there is no need to have any commercial space here. And so this would be dedicated to the residential use.
Yeah, as I recall, we were at something like 37 or 38%.
Right, no disagreement about all of that. I could just, I could imagine that it might actually be viable as commercial at some point. So, but for the present time, it's residential.
Correct.
And I think we can, unless folks have other questions on this, I think I'd like to show you an example of one of the typical, start showing you some examples of the typical upper levels, just so folks understand the relationship between the kind of the front and the back. So again, at the risk of repeating myself, the old building is on the right, and we're able to fit 3 units on 2 floors in the historic part of the building. These are connected via new hallway to an elevator core and short stair, so that because, as John said, the old floor to floor is at 12 and 13 feet, don't line up very well with floors that are at about 10.6 at the moment. And so we've got a kind of a front and back elevator to allow folks to come in the one lobby at the bottom, and if they're in a wheelchair or need other help, they're able to get off at either the front side or the back side, gets them at one of the or other of the floor levels. At the rear of the property, we're able to fit 4 units in a variety of layouts. We have a 2-bedroom, a 3-bedroom, and 2 4s at the back, and then at the front, I think this is consistent between the second and third floors. At the front, there's 2 1-bedrooms and a 3-bedroom.
I see that there are 2 doors between the 2 elevator lobbies and the old building.
Yes, so there's a firewall at that location, and those doors will be on hold opens. But in the notion that either building would have to be able to kind of fall away if there were ever a catastrophic fire, which with a sprinkler system we would hope would never occur. That's what the 2 sets of doors are. The other option would be to have kind of one of those fire shutters. But at the moment we're doing pairs of doors.
All right, Janet, I see your hand.
Doug, so far you're asking all my questions. But I'm, one of my first questions when I was looking at through the packet the first time is, are these two buildings or is this one big building? Is this like an addition to the Hastings building? So I don't really understand. So if I was a tenant on any of the floors in the Hastings buildings, could I walk and go visit my friends on the
Yes.
same floor? And so the doors are freely opening. I didn't know what you.
Yeah.
what
The doors would be on electronic hold opens, so they would be in the open position unless the alarms go off and the doors shut.
Okay, thank you.
There
That's
are
all.
other ways to do this. You know, there are these things that come down, you know, kind of rolling shutters that can come down from above. But this is probably the simplest solution. So you wouldn't necessarily experience them on a day-to-day basis. You wouldn't have to physically open them, but you know, if you come up in the elevator, you can either get off, as I say, in the front, which is the lower side, and that serves the new building, or on the back side, that's about, depending on the floor, 2 to 3 feet higher. And so you have to kind of connect those two. And if you're just walking, there's a set of steps between the two places.
That's all I wanted to know. It was very
Yeah.
clear.
But you are keeping the existing stair in the old building?
Yes, it is going to in fact serve as one of the ways out for that part of the building.
And is that a fire stair?
It is a fire stair today. You know, which we're not going to do. If we were doing a gut rehab of the building, we would have to build that stair differently. But because it's an existing condition, we're permitted to keep the historic character of it.
Okay. All right.
I think we can move continually up the
May I ask
building.
one quick question that has to do with the stairwell in the front?
Sure. Yeah.
My understanding of the existing building is there are the stairs come in kind of off the street.
Yeah.
And you
they
go,
do.
oh, there they are. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. And then it goes to the curling staircase.
That is correct.
Okay.
When we move up to the 4th floor, we're now at the roof level effectively of the existing building, so that we no longer have units on that side, and we have just the 4 new units in the new part of the building. On
Do
the
you
5th floor.
actually have an elevator lobby on the north of the elevator?
It's not going to be a lobby. Whether we build that space out or that's really just I think what we're seeing right now, honestly, is given the mismatch in the levels, that door you're seeing is actually the door below. And this is the upper part of the 3rd floor lobby.
Okay.
Very, very similar plan at the 5th floor. And the 5th floor will actually have a roof access to the roof of the, well, there's the roof access up the stair to the roof, but also to the roof of the Hastings building.
And well, Janet, you go ahead first this time.
Thank you. I'm wondering, I'm looking at the layout of these buildings. Are these 3 and 4 bedrooms aimed at students? Or
What-
aimed for family living? And I guess maybe I could ask this question too about like the prices of rents. Like who do you think the tenants are? Or who are you aiming at? Because that looks kind of that looks student-y to me from what I understand this in this town.
Sure. So I mean, it's market designed. As far as rents go, I mean, again, I hate to say it, but it's market. And so that's, 2-bedroom, you're probably at, $2,500, $2,900 a month, 3-bedroom, $3,500, $3,900, 4-bedroom, $4,500, $4,900 is probably what you're looking at per month for these. And I think one of the things is the distinction. This has 4 beds, 2 baths. Oftentimes, when I'm in front of this board or the zoning board, bed bath parity is one of the things that folks really look for as indicative of it being students. No separate living facilities, et cetera. So this has, it's 4-bed, 2-bath. How do I say this? I mean, I think a 6,000 square foot footprint. And so I give Kuhn Riddle an incredible amount of credit for fitting in what they were able to fit in, based upon what we're actually dealing with. It's an urban design that can only go up 5 stories.
What is bed bathroom parity? I've never heard that term.
So if you had a 4-bedroom, you have a 4-bathroom. So like that's parity, meaning 1 for 1. So if you had 3 beds, you'd have 3 baths.
So you see that for what kind of tenant? I'm kind of a little lost.
Student housing, undergraduate housing, particularly. That's typically what you would see is bedroom, bathroom parity.
Okay, thank you.
All right, looks like a question from Karen.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. That was going to be my question, how many bathrooms, because I'm looking at what kind of couple or who would perhaps be there instead of students. And I have a question. Is it at all, I talked at this site review a little bit about that. Have you ever looked at any possibility of putting something on the roof, making a kind of a roof garden? If you could do anything like that, that would make it so much more attractive for a family or professor who wants to live in town in a condo, the way they love those condos that are on Amity Street. Is that a possibility? And I heard, yes, you have to put all the the other things in the so maybe it's not possible, but it sure is nice on those residential buildings that you see in Manhattan or other cities where you have the possibility of going upstairs and going outside.
And I'll defer to Jonathan on that. Just as a practical matter, what I can say behind the scenes is if we could, Barry would, and there are a couple of other projects that he's contemplating in town and in downtown that would have such a feature. I don't know that this is the right one for it though, but I'll defer to Jonathan just about the space on the roof.
It's a little tight on the roof. The current energy code requires us to dedicate at least in the new building, because it's new construction, 40% of the area to potential future rooftop PV. That's the area that's that kind of medium gray. And then we have our enclosed roof, zone within the screening for the rooftop equipment. There is some additional space up there, but it tends to be towards the edge of the roof of the. I'm not sure that this is the right project for that. I'd be reticent to try to put it on the old roof because I think we would probably trigger structural upgrades. But I tend to agree with Tom. I think it'd be better in another project.
Okay. Bruce, I see your hand, but I want to say, just to remind the board that this is predominantly a site plan review. So the interior of the building is, it's helpful for us to understand it, but it's not really the area in which we have authority to, suggest changes. Bruce, go ahead.
Well, you'll understand why in a minute, I hope, Doug, but I'm about to go right back to where you have warned us off. If drop down a slide, if you wouldn't mind, Jonathan. So there, I was going to say that I think we should make some observation about the suitability of this for family housing. And the reason is because we're being asked later to approve by basically a purchase in lieu of provision of affordable units. And despite what was said earlier, I think there are two factors here that suggest pretty clearly, at least to my sense of how the world works or would work, that suggests that this is more likely, not inevitably, but more likely to appeal to students. And the first observation is that all the bedrooms are the same. In family housing, you very often have the way we typically, we think we work is you have a married couple or a couple of some sort who are sharing a room, and then you have kids who frequently don't share rooms. So you look for one of the bedrooms being a little larger than the others. And the second is the aggregate proportion of bedroom space to living space. And the proportion of bedroom space to living space in these units is quite markedly in favor of bedrooms where people can have some degree of individual privacy, and that's given at the expense of living space, which has been diminished to some degree. So I'm not saying that this is inappropriate. I'm just observing that this is what's likely. And so I will make the observation or the argument, I think, later on to my board colleagues that insofar as this project is not being developed suitably for family housing, and it's in a location in town that perhaps makes that not so surprising. I mean, there's not a lot of recreational availability around here for young kids, but there is for older kids. It seems that this is probably not the best place in town for affordable housing. So if that's true, and I'm proposing it as an argument to be tested later on, I suspect. But insofar as that's true, then the layout that we've got here is kind of consistent with a request from the applicant that they would be seeking to purchase in lieu of providing affordable housing. So that's the only reason why I think we should look inside these, see what we think the likely market is, and make some judgments later on about whether we think that making this purchase in lieu is appropriate. I may have gotten confused. I may be talking nonsense, but that's at least the moment anyway, the way I'm thinking.
Thanks, Bruce. And I certainly read the plans the same way. I do want to mention that I didn't see, or I don't remember seeing any sort of summary of the actual unit mix in the building, like how many 4 bedrooms, how many 3 bedrooms, how many 2 bedrooms. Is that something, Tom or Jonathan, you have at hand?
Yes, so it's 4 1-bedroom units, 4 2-bedroom units, 5 3-bedroom units, and 9 4-bedroom units. 22 units and 63 beds is the total.
So that was 4, 4, 5, and 9.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
All right, Jonathan,
I'm just trying to remember if there was anything else that I wanted
is
to
this
point
the
out.
section through the screen
Yes,
we're referring
yes.
to?
Yeah, and we would make that, I mean, I think the backup, the structural part of it would probably be wood, but we would clad that in the same sort of metal panel that we're putting on the skin of the building. At some point, we'll have to review that with a structural engineer. They may want us to use a perforated panel, but it would still be the same color and textures of the other pieces. There would be a similar piece, which I don't think we've highlighted yet, on the existing building. Now, obviously, there's going to be some mechanical equipment on the existing building. But there we also have the benefit of the traditional high parapets that a typical 19th century building would have. So we're kind of belt and suspenders there a little bit, but better safe than sorry.
Okay.
And I think so. We had worked with working through Barry and some of his suppliers. We have done a kind of tentative lighting layout with a tentative photometric, which is always a challenge on these calls to kind of read.
Could you make that bigger? Or are we gonna?
Yeah, is there anywhere in, so I mean, I'll start,
Yeah.
maybe I'll start at the front and we can, as Jonathan says, walk around the building a little bit.
Those zeros are a little right there, a little disingenuous because they did not do the photometrics on the existing fixtures, and obviously there's also couple street lights right there. But, you know, from there, from the person who ran the computer software, it's 0 because they didn't input anything.
But there are downcast gooseneck lights along the front as they exist today. And that's what's proposed when Amherst College goes in front of the DRB.
And so, you know, when we're close to the street, these are the light levels that the lighting we're installing would cast, and doesn't count necessarily the additional light that street light would have. But we have a row of bollards. I think they call them the MH fixture here, to kind of line that entry path. We have some recessed cans underneath our canopy. I believe there's some step lights. I'm pretty sure we had another light kind of on the back side of that sign to kind of illuminate the side of the ramp there as well. Yeah, I'm just not seeing the fixture number for some reason. And then continuing kind of up that arcade, there's some additional can fixtures that illuminate the arcade and the roof over the parking spots.
Mhm.
And then as we move a little further west and then north, there's kind of a wall or building mounted light fixture above each of the doors. So of that trash room service door, a couple here at the corners where there aren't doors, but it would be otherwise a very dark little corner between the various buildings, and then one at the egress point there.
Jonathan, is the trash exiting the building on the west side or on the south side?
On the west side. If we can move back to that plan if you want to see it in a more detailed view. But it would be kind of in that space, that sidewalk space.
And your trash hauler is okay with that? That seems kind of convoluted as
It's a
far
little
as-
convoluted, but you know, there was some concern about, you know, whether we didn't want to ding up vehicles that might be parked in the parking place, or assume that they're not going to be there at the time the trash needs to go out. And so it was felt that the best decision was to simply take it out of the building directly and bring it around. It's going to be in kind of rolling bins as it is. You know, you're not going to get the big you know, there's not going to be room for a dumpster, so they're going to have to be in rolling bins, unfortunately.
And toters will stay inside the trash room until the trash
Until the
truck
time of-
arrives, or they
that's
will
correct.
come out beforehand?
I don't know, Tom, if you want to talk a little bit to the management plan, but that's as I understand it.
Yeah, and I'll ask Barry. I know he does this on U Drive South, so that has if you're familiar, that's the 3-story building across from Kindergarten, corner of University Drive South and Route 9. There's a trash room there, and they get rolled out for the USA Waste to pick up.
Oh, it's the night before or the morning of.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Janet, I see your hand.
So a question I forgot to raise, which I think is for 11 East Pleasant, was how do people pull up a moving van and unload, or, you know, their minivan or whatever? And especially if people are moving in on probably the same day or the same few days, without like blocking other people's access to this little road here. Is there
Scheduling, just setting up blocks of time when folks are able to actually unload their vehicles. And I don't know how it would be done, like, you know, first floor, second floor, or if it's a little bit between and amongst, but that's how it's done, is that there's a schedule that each tenant would get when they would have the ability to get in, get their stuff out, and then move out of the way to allow another tenant to move in.
But where would the trucks sit is my question. Would they?
I
They'll
would
have to be in
suspect
the drive, yeah.
probably in here.
Isn't that a road?
No,
It is a right of way,
right.
but it is part of the property of this project.
But
Correct.
it's a right of way for everybody behind it, right? And the buildings behind it. So
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think they have alternative access if I go to the aerial,
Yep. There we go.
right? So there's another way to get around from this, the Brody building, so-called. Like they could come out this way so they wouldn't be pinned in if there was a vehicle that was parked in that access.
Tom, I assume that the Brody building has easement rights to the drive in your property.
They do. That's correct.
So it would be something that you would need to probably coordinate, or at least as a courtesy, let them know, on September 1st, we're going to be blocking with our tenant unloading, and you'll need to make your one-way on the south side of the Brody building two-way or something.
Precisely. Yes.
And in your experience, is the fire department okay with that kind of event?
I think we would be coordinating with them as well, but I think they'd be okay with it. Barry's had conversations with Chris Bascom at the fire department just about this site generally, and they were okay with it.
Okay, well, we did have comments from the fire department in our packet.
So perhaps we could put that in the management plan, but so in terms of the other little, the other way in and out of the Brody building, I had a memory that it was one way. Is that a one-way or two-way egress?
My experience is that it's been one way going in on the north side and coming around and then out on the south side. So
Yeah.
that would need to be, temporarily marked otherwise, if they were blocking the space. I suppose it's possible, is it not, Tom, or even Chris, to request to block off a couple of parking spaces on South Pleasant Street for it? You can make that request to town hall and reserve a couple of spaces for your use.
Yes.
Okay. All right, Jonathan, we've continued to interrupt you, but go ahead.
That's all right. I think we were at the end of what I'm going to call the architectural package.
right.
I'm
So
glad to entertain questions, but I think then we do have a short site package too, more formal site package.
Well, before you leave and we go to
Well, I
the
won't go
site
anywhere.
package, I'm going to ask you a question about something that the site package showed. The site package showed a prefabricated concrete stair with a what looked like a or it's a precast concrete step assembly, and it had a railing shown that was not an ADA compliant or MAAB compliant. And I just wasn't sure where that particular piece would show up.
I know where that is.
On sheet 9.
Yep. That is actually right near our front door. The ramp comes up one side, and well, I don't know. That's not that though. I think not to speak for a site designer, I think that may be a kind of standard detail that just landed on this sheet, because that doesn't correspond to our stairs.
Okay. All right.
I will say we need to do some coordination with the site designer on which one of us actually has the final details on the ramp and stair railings. But I expect they'll probably be in the architectural.
Right.
package.
Yeah. I guess I suppose one question I could ask Mr. Roberts is, oh, actually, never mind. I don't. I'll just say, sort of what level of design quality are you striving for in this forecourt and the sort of pedestrian experience approaching the building? Is it pretty low end, something like that prefabricated precast stair, or is it more, crafted?
I think we're looking for something that's more crafted. I will certainly defer to Barry and the finances that come along with the project, but the intent is not to have a precast stair. What we presented to the DRB is that the retaining walls around the planters would be stone of some sort. I'm showing sort of a granite, but the final construction details are not done on that portion of it.
All right. Well, I think you showed us some of the materials for the building. Do you have any? Are you at the point of having materials for this forecourt?
Well, I think we could probably present some more. Our intent is to, as I say, do it out of stone. But I don't
Well,
know
I'm
that we have
thinking,
final
I'm
material
thinking
selected
of
yet.
the railing and
Yeah.
the site walls and, how, what kind of materials are you using for that?
Yeah.
Is the ramp an asphalt ramp or is
No,
it,
no, let's
or is it
actually, maybe
concrete,
we
or
went
is
back
it
past it too
paved with
quickly.
stone?
Yeah, let's go back to the architectural package, Tom, if we could. No, the intent is to do, I'll let it come up.
Huh? That's not it.
Life's a beach.
There we go.
Yeah, so if we scroll down to, I think it's A8, we have that kind of blow up view. I must have clearly moved too fast through that. So our intent is to do stone kind of edging to the planting beds, precast concrete pavers for the kind of walkway surfaces that are the ramp, and then obviously the sidewalk, the repairs to the sidewalk that are on the street will be in concrete. The sidewalk along the south side is intended to be cast in place concrete. We have a wooden bench and a bike rack along that south edge. And then if I didn't touch it before, we've got the evergreen plantings around the transformer, some more seasonal kind of ornamental grasses that'll make up the rest of that block, plus a tree that would have a higher canopy so we can see underneath it. Then at the front of the site, we have a kind of a mixture of perennials and annuals, something that they'll have color during the warmer seasons of the year.
Okay.
The intent with that canopy, the canopy is going to be a metal framed canopy. And similarly, we would do metal handrails for the ramps and stairs.
And there's lighting under that canopy?
Yes. Yep. They'd
Okay.
be I think they'd be recessed. Maybe we'd do a surface, but at the moment we're looking at a recessed.
All right. Chris, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, and I think Jonathan said this already, that there needs to be a coordination between the civil drawings and the architectural drawings because there are differences. And I think the walls that encase these planting areas are labeled concrete walls on the civil drawings. So if you intend something else, they should be labeled appropriately on these drawings. So there's just some coordination that needs to happen that hasn't happened yet. Thank you.
All right. So Jonathan, I guess one more question.
Yep.
I do see the list of recommendations from the design review board. And I wondered whether any of what we're seeing incorporates those comments or how in fact you've responded to them.
Yep. So we have explored a number of the things they looked at, or they suggested. Some of them, when we looked at it, we didn't necessarily agree with them. For example, they suggested painting or using a yellow brick at the base of the new building. We really like the contrast of the red brick versus the yellow brick, and like tying in the color of the brick at the base to the tower. And while I have your notes up on my other screen here, I don't know that I opened the DRB's comments.
I mean, I could read them for you.
Yeah, if you would be so kind.
All right, so the first one, the applicant should consider a method to make the elevator shaft feel less independent, whether it be through color scheme or blending of materials.
Yeah, so if we go back to the earlier 3D views that show the whole building, that's one, honestly, as the design team, we don't necessarily agree with. We like the architectural separation that the tower has as a separate color and a slightly taller form. And I don't know that there was necessarily unanimity on the part of the DRB on that topic.
Okay. Second item, consider incorporating more outdoor lighting into the arcade area.
And I think we've responded to that. I don't know that we had that photometric or the lighting plan at the time that they reviewed it.
All right.
In fact, I'm sure we did.
I guess, Karen, I know you're on the DRB and I see your hand. do you want to say something before I go through the rest of these?
Yeah, I was at that meeting and you're right, Jonathan, there was not unanimity about that. I personally am on that board and I agree with you. I like the separation too. But I wanted to say this arcade coming in, I don't know, it looks different to me than on the other pictures that I said. Have you considered having that that brick thing in the front is just a sign? Is there any reason for that? To block it off? I mean, it seems like you could make that whole thing accessible from the street and kind of open it up as a place for people to meet.
Unfortunately, and we may still have a stepped connector there where we're still going back and forth a little bit with the site designer on that. But unfortunately, the cross slopes, if we brought the ramp straight down into the sidewalk at the street, the cross slopes don't meet accessibility guidelines, unfortunately.
So you need the longer run.
We
that
need the
you
longer
count
run and to
from
meet up at a
from turning
leveler
the corner.
spot on the sidewalk.
I see.
The sidewalk at the end of that ramp, if it came out straight, not only it's a little steep in the north-south direction, but it also pitches in the east-west direction, and so it's a rather warped plane.
Okay, Janet.
So I agree with Karen on that wall with the number on it just seems, I first saw this plan, I thought, oh, this is great. Here's this place that, kind of invites you in, and that brick wall just says, don't come here. And then behind it is this kind of wall of kind of boring grasses. And I thought it's to me, it's sort of a missed opportunity to sort of tie in the street, people passing by, and the people who live there. And I wonder if it could be more of a plaza. And I don't suggest, getting rid of the ramp, because obviously it's important, but I would get rid of the wall and kind of the tedious, what I would think of as almost corporate plantings of grasses and the same evergreens, and make it more of a garden, maybe with more seating for people in the building, or somebody who's going to come up with a cup of coffee and maybe talk to someone. Like that wall just makes it kind of pushes the interaction away from the street, if that makes any sense. So I just wondered if you could make that plaza more of a nice community meeting spot, or a place where the tenants can sort of sit. I love the idea of perennials and different ones, and I just think there's different grasses, and forget the grasses, I hate grasses, but different shrubs that bloom at different times, or just kind of a nice garden. There's some really pretty gardens in downtown Amherst. The one by Share Coffee is beautiful. The one by First Church is amazing. It'd be great to do something a little more exciting and something that invites people in to the community, to tie it into the community more.
All right, thanks, Janet.
If I could weigh in here quickly, one thing that is different from what the design review board saw was that the ramp under the arcade connected out with the street. And this is a change that was made, I think, when dealing with the civil engineering and grading part of it. I still think we need to make that ramp connect to the street, or maybe there's a couple steps there. But the fact, I like that brick wall and that sign, but the fact that you have to come down and make a right-hand turn to get out to the street is just doesn't work. So I think that's something that will be modified. Hopefully soon, as the design gets developed.
All right. I could imagine moving that wall to the backside of the ramp. Just to throw that
Perhaps.
out as you think about it further. Bruce.
The other thing we could explore is our property line actually isn't at the face of the Hastings building. We could enlarge the size of that planting bed towards the street by 2 or 3 feet and still be on the project's property. And maybe you develop that as a little bit deeper of a planting area. Maybe you can develop it into a bench as well, or a seating opportunity.
Yeah, I feel like, if you're sitting on the bench you've got now, you're looking at the blank wall of the Brody building. And, despite, I guess, Janet hoping that we draw the public in there and maybe have more benches, I think we need some benches out at the street where you actually get some sun and you've got some people walking by to look at. So, I mean, I think that would be worth considering. All right, we have two hands up. Bruce first and then Karen.
Well, I was, well, first of all, I would say about this whole entry and the way in which it's designed, the existing building, the graceful kind of human scale development of this southeast corner that goes through to the building, the new building at the back. I agree with you, Jonathan and Karen. I think the red tower is fine, and it would be sad to comply with that element of the DRB that wants it to somehow be muted. I like the whole way in which this works and is offered. But as we get down to the very small scale right at the street, I agree with you, Doug. I think that we could do better. I think that having the seating over there, now it's nice that the rendering shows the sun at, I'm going to guess, 9 a.m. If the seating, and the seating now is quite nice as far as sun is concerned, but it does offer the blank wall and there's not much people. If the seating could be put in the area against the street where you've got the grasses and so forth, I did a little sketch that I'm not terribly proud of it because I did it just to make a point, and it may not be necessary to show it because I think the concept is fairly easy to understand. But it does seem to me that the place to put seating that would be a real benefit to the public, it would be a nice gesture, a nice public gesture to put seating along some of the length of that grassed area that's right against the street. Yes, there. You could move the wall if you wanted to have a pillar at the end with 55 on it, or you could do as I think Doug just said, you could push it to the back side of the ramp rather than the front side. But if seating was offered here in some portion of that, it might be half of it, or it might be 2/3 of it, but certainly to the northern end of it. I think then as the sun came around to 11 o'clock and noon, you would still get the last vestige of sun would be shining in that area on that seating. The southeast is a really golden quadrant because that's where the warm morning sun comes, and it really is a lovely way to sit because you are sheltered from the north and the west winds in this location. You've got the morning sun, you've got people walking by, you've got the common. It just seems to be a place that is begging to have a seat so that someone can enjoy everything that's on offer there at certain times of the year. So I would ask whether that has been thought about, or whether it might be thought about, and whether that's not such a good idea, or that I've been mentioning, and I guess I'm kind of advocating for it as well. There may be good reasons why that's a bad idea, but I don't see them at the moment, and I would like to know if it's not a great idea, because I think this really nice design that you've got here that brings people off the street and into this building, gracefully integrates the two buildings, manages a lot of things very well, I think. I think it could be made just a little bit more perfect by making this public offering in a sunny, sheltered spot with plenty of opportunity to look at people as you're sitting down, perhaps having your Vera Cruzana or whatever is in that shop next door. I hope that's considered an attraction for undesirables, because I would love to see that I could think of sitting there at some point. As you know, I used to work for 3 or 4 or 5 years above that, right above, 3 stories above that corner, and I'm quite familiar with this part of the world, and particularly this corner, because my office was in exactly this location, but 25 feet above it, and I know what the morning sun feels like from that quadrant.
Well, Bruce, when Tom and I were talking this morning about the review and the development report, that we were beginning to talk about just that. I think we'd be certainly open to looking at further development on that, certainly in that front piece. And I'm not going to dismiss any of the other ideas that folks have put out about other aspects of this. We're still very much open to making this kind of I don't quite call it a pocket garden because it's not quite big enough to beat that, but or a pocket park, I should say. But I think you're right. This has the potential for being a great amenity, not just for the project, but for this little slice of the town center. And so we'd be glad to continue to explore some ideas here.
Yeah, I think
Alright.
these are all really good points, and this needs more development. And I'm repeating myself, but I think it's really important to connect the arcade directly to the street and not. There still need to be a ramp there, but there needs to be a connection directly to the street, not have a planting bed in the way.
All right. All
I'm,
right.
I would argue with you on that, John, but we got plenty of time to do that, and I'm just on the board here, and I don't usually want to advocate for architectural solutions. That's not why I'm here, but this just seems to be such a perfect opportunity, and I've spent a lot of time just as Johanna has. We're living in this place here in recent years. Anyway, that's my piece. I'll shut up.
Thank you, Bruce. All right, we've got another hand up from Karen, and then I see one hand from someone in the public that we need to get to at some point. And I also see that we are approaching 8 o'clock, when we often take a break for a few minutes. So board members, think about whether we're far enough through this that you want to continue it after a break. So Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, very short. I think you've chimed in with exactly what I think. This is, for me, one of the most important features of adding this whole complex is getting this arcade right. And I think there should be a lot of brainstorming how to get as much seating and make this a cozy, really inviting, beautiful place. And I think you got the message, and look at it from all sides, getting rid of that, making seating in the front, making a lot of seating. Yeah, just hope. I'm really looking forward to different solutions here. Thanks.
All right. I guess I will just chime in that I'm not thinking about making it so inviting as to making it a sort of delightful thing that I observe as I walk by.
Mm.
Janet.
My quick chime was, I was thinking of it in both ways, in connecting the people who live in the building with the community, and like that would be a great place to come out and have some coffee and sit in the sun and sit in some, look at some flowers and see people go by, or maybe talk to them. And so I was thinking more of a plaza kind of thing for the people who live there, and also for people walking by. So
All right. Let's see, Karen, your hand is still up. Do you have anything else? All right, and Janet, I'm going to drop your hand too. All right, Pam, why don't we call the one person, Johanna, go ahead.
This question has been sitting in the back of my mind, and I was trying to figure out whether to ask it or not. So Doug, if you want to put the kibosh on it, by all means do. But to me, this seems like just an absolute prime location in town. And I don't know enough about how you decide what is market rate, but why is there not $1 million penthouse, like luxury cash cow apartment in the top of this thing that would bring in tons of revenue for the town?
Well, I guess you'd have to ask Barry Roberts that, I think.
Part of that is we can't go to 6 stories.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think, Jonathan, that's a great point. Let us go higher. But this project is going to be rental. Their preview of coming attractions, and Jonathan, I think, knows where I'm going with this. There's a project that Kuhn Riddle and Barry have been working on that is a downtown space that is going to be proposed as condominium units. So this just isn't, I could go into all the factors why, but I think I'll just suffice to say that fingers on the pulse of what could be, and it's 37 North Pleasant Street is the site for it, and Cunardle has done a really nice job with some plans, parking underneath, commercial at the front, and then 4 stories of residential, really nice apartment units. Figuring out, is there rooftop space, is there first floor, second floor space. So yeah, I mean, again, really thinking about it, this just isn't the one.
Okay. I suspect, to some degree, the fact that you don't want to put another story on the Hastings building is also part of it.
Right.
That there's a pretty substantial financial penalty for having to reinforce that structure.
That would require us to, basically do a gut reconstruction of that building. And there's actually on the upper floors a lot of still original woodwork, window moldings and that sort of thing that we as architects want to preserve, and I know Barry as a building owner, building manager, would want to preserve as well.
Okay. All right. I don't see any more board hands, so why don't we go and do a couple of public comment hands? Pam, if you could bring the person with the phone number over to let them comment. And why don't we see?
Eddie?
Hello, hello. Welcome to our board meeting, and please give us your name and your street address. You have 3 minutes.
So,
Hello?
He's muted.
Can you unmute yourself? I believe you can press *9.
*9 allows him to raise his hand, but I'm not sure how he gets unmuted. Not sure either.
Yeah, Pam, I can hear you, but I can't hear the. Hello? All right. Pam, why don't we bring in the next person and give this person a few minutes to think about how to unmute themselves.
Hi,
All right.
Pam.
Pam Rooney, welcome, and give us your name and your street address.
Hi, Pam Rooney, 42 Cottage Street. This has been a great presentation. I'm looking forward to seeing this work done. I had a couple of nitty-gritty questions, and one has to do with the operation of the bookstore. There doesn't seem to be any clear route from the bookstore to the trash room at the back of the building, and that probably wants to be fairly seamless to make it easy for Amherst College to function smoothly. Secondly, I will add my voice to the conversation about seating at the front of the building along South Pleasant Street. I think, as everyone has said, it is a wonderful opportunity to have some viewing, to sit and watch, to sit and engage, and to have a place for those Amherst College families who are going to spend lots of money in the store, just hang out while they're waiting for something else to be happening. I think it will add to the conviviality of activities on South Pleasant Street, which of course we want to enhance. I'll just leave it at that, but I think that front area could go a lot farther. So incorporation of some seating into that area that is shown as flower bed. I would discourage anyone from thinking about encroaching further into the walkway along South Pleasant Street. I think that's an important activity zone for pedestrians. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Pam. Next, let's bring Letitia La Follette back. And Letitia, we can now take your comment. Hello, Letitia, please unmute yourself.
Okay, I did now, fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Letitia La Follette, 18 Dana Street. This was a great presentation and really good discussion of the entrance arcade. I strongly support the project for 3 reasons. The first is that it's going to create 22 new residential units in the center of town, along with obviously maintaining the Hastings building and making it actually even more attractive. Amherst needs both the housing and that commercial space. The second reason that's especially important to me is the nearly $400,000 in annual yearly tax revenue that the project is estimated to bring Amherst. The town needs this kind of revenue. For far too long, Amherst has relied on residential property taxes to pay for its budget. We need to diversify the revenue sources of the town, and development like this one is an important way to do so. And finally, something that hasn't really been discussed much is the proposal Mr. Roberts has made to pay over $1 million to the Affordable Housing Trust. I think this is a visionary idea. Doing this instead of creating 3 affordable units in this complex, which is problematic for several reasons. I think the additional money, the AHT funds, could be used to help with home ownership over apartment rentals, which is something I think many of us want to encourage. So for these 3 reasons, as well as the very positive reviews the project has received from the Design Review Board, I would urge the Planning Board to move ahead on this proposal. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Letitia. And thanks for waiting to deliver your comments. Pam Rooney, I assume your hand is no longer needed and that you don't have a second comment to make, but well, I'll go to Kent, and Pam, if your hand is still up, then we'll come back to you. Kent Farber, let's bring Kent over. Kent, please give us your name and your street address.
Yes, Kent Ferber, 481 Station Road, District 5. And thank you for the opportunity to comment. This has been a very interesting and thorough presentation. And I basically want to second Letitia's comments, particularly concerning the way projects like this will help with pretty severe financial problems being encountered by the town right now. Financial problems which end up, because revenues don't match expenses by such a large portion, end up pitting one segment of the town, one group of interests against another, and just exacerbating the kind of divides that characterize Amherst and our society today. I also strongly support the payment in lieu of the affordable housing units, because it will give the Housing Trust the flexibility to solve the affordable housing problem in a way that they're much more capable of figuring out than we are, and it gives them the flexibility to do that. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and I hope you'll support this project.
All right, thank you, Kent. All right, I don't see any more hands from the public, and I don't, oh. Okay, and none from the board at the moment. Board members, do you want to continue this conversation this evening? Jonathan, is there more material you want us to go through? Did you want to go through the civil drawings in more detail? I know there were some questions in the development report about the stormwater management, and you know, we could spend the time tonight to go through that and through the rest of the design review board comments. But it seems like we've already gotten to a point where you're saying, hey, we need to think about that some more, and maybe you'll be coming back anyway.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, I think for what it's worth, with our engineer here tonight, why don't we get into the site plan just to talk about drainage and see if there are any, real concerns, if any modifications need to be made, because what I've heard so far is, go back, particularly really look at that front entrance, seating, et cetera, which is really more of an architectural piece of it, obviously site plan component. so that ideally we come back on March 20th. And, you know, with all due respect to Phil Henry, maybe we can give him the night off. So
Okay, all right. So in that case, Bruce, I see your hand. I am going to suggest maybe after Bruce makes a comment that we take a break and for 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and go through the civil drawings. Bruce.
I was just going to observe that we did have a site visit on this, and we haven't mentioned that. I mean, we typically have a short report from
You're
those.
right.
Yeah.
I lost track of that. So why don't we start on that when we come back from our break?
I thought you might want to do that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, the time now on my clock is 8:11. 5 minutes from now is 8:16. Please turn off your cameras and mute your microphones and come on back and turn on your camera at least at 8:16. Thank you. All right, looks like it's 8:16, and if you are lurking in behind a camera that's turned off, please turn it on.
Doug, I'm back. I'm just getting situated. It's Johanna.
All right, thank you, Johanna. All right. Tom, are you comfortable going forward at this point? I see Barry and Jonathan still have their cameras off. I'm not sure whether they're back.
Yeah, I know Barry's back.
Okay.
And Jonathan, I'll trust that he's back. But we can turn it over to Phil there he is. Okay, great. We'll turn it over to Phil. I'm gonna share my screen. I'm just gonna put up the grading plan. If there are, and Phil can say this
Well,
himself, but if
actually,
there
I
are,
mean, okay, well, so before you do that, let's do the site visit report.
sure.
And Bruce, and I'm not sure who else attended. Is there anyone that wants to be the spokesperson, or do you want to just start, Bruce?
I could do that. I mean, I think that at this point that it's important just so that the record shows that that the four of the planning board didn't conduct this hearing without anyone having actually ever been there. Four of us did: Janet, Karen, Fred, who's not here for some reason. I hope that everything's okay in the life of Fred, and myself. So we toured the outside of the building. We didn't go inside. We walked around. We had Jonathan and Barry were there. Jonathan, you were there, weren't you? Yes.
No, it was me. It was me, Bruce.
Oh,
don't insult Jonathan like that.
Oh, golly, yes, it's true. Jonathan, you had more hair. So, but Barry was there, and so was Chris. We did notice, the extent of the building and so forth, and so we stood where the corners were. It really is a great increase in the coverage of actual building. The site coverage is going down, but the building coverage is obviously going way up. We did look, as we'll mention in a minute. There's a drainage proposal that basically has a good portion of the drainage wrapping around the northwest, and then the south side of the building. As best we could see, the grade was pretty solid, and the water would run pretty quickly around that very long trajectory. We can talk some, but we did see that, and we discussed it. We noted the pressure treated wood retaining wall that was staying and why, and the trees that were there. And Barry, I think, decided that moving the wall would basically mean the trees would go away. I think he thought that he could that the trees were worth keeping and could be kept, and so they will be kept. And the only thing that I'll add, and Karen or Janet can say something if they choose, I suppose. But what hasn't been mentioned yet, but was very evident when you were walking around the building, was that the space on the north side of the building, which leads around and into the plaza behind or alongside the cinema center, which opens out into the whatever the name of that restaurant is now, that alleyway is going to be substantially increased in width. It's about 4 feet, if that. At the moment, it's probably going to be closer to 14 feet. So a really substantial increase in the and if you looked on the lighting plan, you'd see that the lighting levels are really quite substantial. I think it'll feel very safe around there. And you might tell us, Jonathan, whether those lights are on any kind of control that's going to keep them on all night, or whether they have to be shut off. But it seems that there might be a case if the longer they're on, probably the better for the town, I think. Anyway, we noted all of that, I don't know whether others would add anything I've forgotten.
Karen?
No, but I'm hoping that that alleyway evolves into a nice sort of an outdoor space behind the Bank of America. I keep mentioning that. I like the fact that it's getting bigger, and that it's going to be a safe place to be outside.
Okay. And Janet, I assume you don't want to add anything?
I don't have anything to add. Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right. Thanks, Bruce. And Tom will resume your presentation, and thanks for waiting.
Perfect. And maybe to answer one of Bruce's questions, the lights will be dusk to dawn. So that's the idea with those lights, those wall packs on the north and westerly side, is that they would get on at dusk and then come off at dawn. So they'd be on timers that way.
I think that's a generous offering on the part of the owner. Others may, but anyway, we'll see. But I think they are lights that will be, there will be betterment if they're on.
So what I'll do, I'm going to start with the demolition and erosion control plan, just to kind of highlight what Bruce had said. So you'll see in this gray that I'm hovering over right now, that's the existing L of the building. And you see to the north of it is the Amherst Cinema building. And so this is, for those on the site walk, this is where we had walked, and we stopped about, right here where we had a little bit more breathing room, to the north. This is that area behind, Bank of America is over here, but some Bank of America parking is right here. And you'll see where this black dashed line is, that's the extent of the new building. And so you'll see, and I think you're right, Bruce, and I'll flip down to it in a minute when we're going to turn over to Phil, but I think it's about 14 feet from building to building in this area. And it's certainly 10 feet at least from the property line. So you can see where it is currently, and then where it's going to go and what that dimension is going to look like, especially in relation to what's there now.
Hey, Tom?
Yes.
Before you leave that, something just popped into my head. And maybe this is a question more for Jonathan or even John Kuhn. You've been so respectful of the setbacks, of the 10-foot setbacks. Which on the one hand I appreciate. It's fewer waivers or variances or permits, but could the project be substantially better in some way if you shifted it farther north, or went farther west, or were those constraints that have been obstacles, or did everything really go smoothly?
No, at times we were struggling against that 10-foot boundary, but there's building code constraints that come as well as you get closer to a property line, and the 10 feet really worked out to be a good balance point between not having to reduce the amount of glazing, for example, that would happen as you get closer to the property line. And so would it be nice to have a few more, another foot or two inside the building? Yes, but I think it's a reasonable trade-off. I'd rather have bigger windows than, say, another 6 inches in the length of a room or something like that. So we did certainly look at it. We we spent a lot of time saying, well, what if we do this? What if we do that? But it really was in the end the best balance point.
Okay,
I'll add to that, that on the south side, you really can't go further because that's a right of way, and that's where your vehicular access comes in. On the
Right.
north side, if you go closer, you're up against the backside of the cinema building. So there's really got to be some airspace between there, especially on the lower floors. They're going to be looking at a wall as it is. So keeping that back certainly makes sense. And on the west side, the existing retaining wall, as you can see there, is already several feet over the property line. So that's not a 10-foot, that's not going to feel like 10 feet back there. It's probably going to feel more like 6 or 7 feet unless that wall is moved. So it seemed like this was the right balance for all those reasons.
okay, thank you. Go ahead, Tom.
Thanks. So I'll bring up the grading and drainage plan. And I'll turn it over to Phil just to talk through just treatment of water on the site.
Thanks, Tom. For the record, my name is Phil Henry with Civil Design Group. We were the civil engineers on this project. I think a lot of what I would talk about has already been discussed, as it's quite obvious. The proposed condition as compared to the existing condition, obviously we have a lot more building, which equals cleaner runoff, because a rooftop is considered clean runoff, and it's captured via a drain pipe that's directly connected into the catch basin. So in the proposed condition, there's a lot less what I'll call surface runoff that is traveling via sheet flow or concentrated flow on the ground. However, with that being said, I think one member had indicated that I don't know if I could draw on this. Well, I'll try to direct I'll direct Tom. There's flow arrows or little arrows that are shown on the grading plan. So where Tom's hand is on the north side, water does traverse around in a westerly direction on the north side, and then basically is conveyed along in a southerly direction on the westerly side. And then as you get around to the ADA parking space, it travels easterly along the southerly side of the building, and then eventually makes its way into that catch basin via some regrading of the driveway. Well, somebody can make an argument as to add upstream infrastructure. The way we looked at it is, if you look at, I understand this is an urban development, but it's akin to, say, for instance, if you look at subdivision regs, which maybe in this town or some other towns, catch basins are to be placed at every 300 feet on roadways, and the lineal footage from catch basin traversing around the building along the north side is about 300 feet, and it's on average, we'll call it a 12-foot width, which is basically half the width of a typical crowned 24-foot roadway. So while water has to travel a serpentine distance, it's not a significant watershed. There is a catch basin just to the north of the project that is on the cinema parcel that will take any offsite water, but that was the thinking behind not adding any infrastructure, was the fact that this is the watershed contributing to that catch basin is really no larger than say a typical subdivision road, although we understand that this is not a subdivision road. So I'm happy to take any specific questions as it relates to that.
Okay. My first question is for Chris. First of all, I assume the Conservation Commission does not need to look at this project, but have you solicited any comments from the town engineer?
We have solicited comments, but we haven't received any. And so I think I would recommend to Tom Reedy and maybe Barry Roberts to get in touch with the town engineer and prompt him to send the planning board a note saying that he's looked at these plans and that they are sufficient, or give us comments on them, because I think sometimes when the applicant prompts the town engineer, he responds better than when we do.
We can certainly do that.
Okay. All right. And then, I guess one scenario that comes to mind is, if it happens to be raining heavily on September 1st, when all your tenants are parked in the drive and they're trying to walk into the building, having that sheet flow coming around the corner of the building, is going to make for a whole lot of really wet feet. Um, and I can imagine just not finding that very pleasant to have to walk in and out of the building when that's happening. So it may be okay, but it could be kind of unpleasant. Janet.
I have a question for Mr. Henry and also for the town engineer is, we're all gonna, all the predictions are we're gonna see more water and more rain and, more extreme rains. And we're always dealing with the building code that's based on the past. And so my concern is, are these, are the catch basins big enough to hold water? Can we process it? What happens if we have a real, an extreme rain? And where does the water go? And does it just go onto North Pleasant Street? And is there just an argument for saying, let's put an extra one in for those events? Or are we not making them big enough now because the code hasn't caught up to the reality that we're seeing? And so I've heard people raise this issue over and over. And I know even when we did the FEMA maps, we're always looking at the past and not looking in the future, which makes sense, but it's making less and less sense not to consider, how many 100-year rains have we had in the last 20 years, so I would just wonder, are people starting to think, let's just make them bigger or put some extras in just for some insurance?
All right. Mr. Henry, do you have any comment about or response to that, or just let it go?
I guess what I would say is we're governed by the regulations at which an applicant or an application is submitted. I will tell you that this stormwater analysis and the stormwater report, the HydroCAD, is based on the NRCC Northeast Atlas stormwater requirement or rainfall data. So for instance, the 210 and 100-year storm have been elevated from previous, traditional type 3 runoff rainfall data. So this is the more intense or the more heavily derated storms, if you will, that we're analyzing. We're also governed by the metric that we need to mitigate our peak flow off site. So if there is any bypass in a catch basin, we have to make sure that the peak flows are mitigated, and we do that by, although be it minor, there is a reduction of impervious area on this site. So this site's considered a redevelopment. So under Mass DEP standards, there's a different sort of standards, if you will, in terms of mitigating or meeting redevelopment standards, by which peak flow mitigation is still required, and which is shown in the HydroCAD calculations.
So I guess my question is, do you think it's enough, or is it's sort of, no one can predict the future, but I understand what you're saying about the changing standards, but is it enough 20, 30 years from now when we're seeing much, much more rain? Because it's all going to go to the common, or somewhere, right?
Yeah, well, I would say yes, it is sufficient because we're governed by the regulations that are before us. 20, 30 years from now, that means all infrastructure in town would need to be upgraded.
Okay.
But when you say that you are governed, the regulations give you a minimum that you have to do. It doesn't preclude you from doing more. And I think the gist of Janet's question is, would it be good engineering to perhaps do more than the regulations are requiring at this point?
Sure. I mean, I guess I'll defer to my client on that.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I also note that it looks like the grade toward the south across the property line is falling. And so is it likely that some of the water that's coming around the southwest corner is actually going to keep going south rather than turn the corner?
Um, uh, I would, I would say it all depends on the fine grading. I'll admit that asphalt really is tied into the abutting asphalt directly to the south. You'll notice though that I'd argue that if you look at, Tom, if you can point to elevation 321 right there. So the dark contour, the darker, thicker contour is the proposed contour, where the existing contour is the dash contour. As you can see there, we're creating more of, I'll call it a ridge, or a high point in that southerly lot line. And we're more inviting or encouraging the water to stay on our property and head more in an easterly direction as opposed to a southeasterly direction. So while there may be some bleed off in the southerly direction, I would argue that it would be no more than the existing condition.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right, Tom, is there any more, what other drawings do you want to show us?
I don't know that there needs to, I mean, we really covered a lot, I think, through the architectural piece. And to a certain extent, the site is what the site is. So I don't know that we need to go into anything more as far as I'm concerned with the
Okay.
site plan, but I'll
All
defer
right.
to Ms. Brestrup and the board.
Chris, I see your hand, and I had one other question. So
I
go
wonder
ahead.
if Mr. Henry or Mr. Reedy can talk about the roof drainage. I think some of the roof drainage goes into the catch basin in the driveway, and some of the roof drainage goes in a different direction. So just, give the board a sense of what happens there.
Yeah, I could talk about that. The new portion of the building and the overhang along the colonnade or the arcade along the front will be captured and piped into that existing catch basin in the alleyway. The Hastings building has, as I understand it, has a roof drain leader, and Jonathan may have to help me with this, in the back right corner or the northwesterly corner that discharges in a northerly direction. So essentially that the mercantile building is that watershed and that capture area is remaining unchanged from the existing and to the proposed condition. So essentially the existing building to remain is heading north and the new building is heading south.
Thank you.
All right. And then I was just going to ask, for the vehicles that are supposed to be potentially using the 2 parking spaces, are the turning radiuses adequate? Is there adequate room for for those vehicles to actually get into those spaces? It looks like they would have to go over into the Brody building area in order to, get into the space.
Yeah, I would say that's a fair assessment. Pulling into the space, they could probably pull into the space. Backing out, a typical car probably needs 22 feet to properly back out and then come out of that area. So yeah, there might be a temporary backing out onto in a southerly direction.
Okay, and has that fact been discussed with the adjacent property owner?
We haven't talked to them yet about that, but I think there's existing conditions that probably do where the same thing is done.
Yeah, okay. All right, Janet?
In the development application report, the question was raised about like, who are those spaces for? Are they for the use of the tenants? Are they for commercial people who are using, is it parking for people using the Hastings building? And then, how are those being allocated in a certain way? And then if there's EV charging and it's going to be ADA spaces for tenants, so sort of what's the thinking there kind of thing? How are they being used?
So there's going to be an EV charger. I believe it's going to be against the building. And Chris, we can show that on the next plan if we need to, but it's going to be on the building, not just out in this sidewalk. The ADA space is an ADA space. I don't think these are dedicated to tenants or visitors. I think it's more, as Jonathan had mentioned, drop off is more likely what these are going to be, not somewhere where somebody could come park. Any tenant is going to have it, and it's not related to that commercial space.
Will they be signed for, 15-minute parking? Keep
Yeah.
your blinkers on, or get a permit from the Hastings building, or how?
Yeah, they'll be managed appropriately. I'm not
What?
sure, frankly, what that looks like, but they'll be managed appropriately.
Why would you put an EV charger in a temporary spot? It seems, unless it's a
I think we
supercharger.
have to. I think it's a code.
Yes, that I'll chime in here. The latest round of energy code requirements mandate a minimum. Yeah, I think obviously if we had no parking, we wouldn't have to provide it, but once we do, I think we have to provide that minimum one.
Huh, it seems unfortunate that you couldn't use it for like overnight charging by one of the residents or something, but it doesn't. But I could see the need for the drop off too, so I'm kind of a little lost.
Yeah.
Okay. Bruce.
I've been thinking for quite a while about, not on this project, but generally societally, why how people in apartment buildings charge or will come to charge their EVs, because if, as we are being told, that the transition away from fossil fuels happens, and it's going to happen well within the first half of the span of this building. So reasonably, we should be, the people who are building buildings these days should be imagining how they're going to function in a fully renewable energy economy. And I think, clearly the world is a long way short of that, but it doesn't mean that we can't pick away at the edges of it. And one of the things I've been wondering is, how do buildings like this support people who live in them who own EVs? I think there's probably going to be lots of questions to that, and that they charge them in remote places and so forth. But I think giving some thought to how this eventually you could put more EV charging in here, and maybe both of those spaces would be, or but I think it's somehow or other, I'm sure there is going to be changes in the way these parking gets used as time goes by, related to, for example, the need for people to charge their vehicles. And I think we probably just have to accept that evolution will happen out of our control. But if Barry or Jonathan have any ideas about how we could facilitate that transition somewhat, it would be a nice thing to be thinking about. I'm not asking for a response to this. I'm just making a public comment, really.
So in this case, I would expect that we have two places. There will be one charging unit, and often those come with two heads. Although, depending on how this one is actually used, which is, admittedly a little clearer to all of us at this point as we go through this transition, it could, the cords, if it's placed centrally, the cord can reach either vehicle, even if it isn't a dual-headed one.
Okay. Janet, are you coming back?
Yeah, is it possible that you could, meet the new code by putting the EV charger in front of the Hastings building, so it'd be actually useful to people? Because it seems like you're
At that
putting.
point, it would be on town infrastructure. I think that would be the challenge.
Yeah, it just seems like they're going in and no one's going to use them, and it just seems kind of tragic to me. And I wonder if you could put it in front of the Hastings building, someone can charge for at least 2 hours or a
They'll
long.
get used.
What?
I think he
They'll
said they
get
would
used.
be used. I mean, it may be that, I suppose, Tom, that maybe the landlord might schedule its use for, allow tenants to park there long enough to charge, and I don't know.
I think it's
I
going to be
guess-
an evolution without getting
Yeah.
into, I just, think to Janet's point and Jonathan's, it's a little bit of a transition, and we're trying to navigate how to best utilize it while balancing non-abuse of folks parking there just to charge when somebody else
For
may
free.
need it, et cetera, et cetera. So
Right. I guess one question that this drawing brings to mind for me is, you know, it looks like if you removed the section of wall, right, exactly, you could get at least one more space, if not two more, probably not only one with the ADA requirements, but, you know, would it be worthwhile putting in a beam across that and getting a third space out of it?
and I don't want to talk for Jonathan, but I'm gonna a little bit. I mean, if we went back to the elevations, looking at it from the southerly facade, I mean, you've got a lot of consistency with the
Yep.
spacing of
Yep.
those. And then I'm gonna put my engineer's hat on, and we're talking about, you know, this is an accessible path also, and all of a sudden, if you put, I think I would just be hesitant to put another parking space in here, because what does that then do to the path from this ADA space to here to get in, right? So there's landing, there's slopes and grades that we have to take into consideration. So I think
I'll
those would be
jump
my
in too.
concerns.
We actually did not have that pier there for a while. We had a large opening, and it looked rather bizarre, and it's a huge beam to go that far. So
Uh-huh.
we added it back in because we could still get the two spaces easily, and it improved the appearance on the south side.
Okay. And the walkway that's running inside, sort of under the building, that's east of the parking spaces, could you bring the first floor plan back, Tom?
Sure.
I'm just wondering, is there window from the,
Yes, there is. There's under that arcade, as Tom gets that up, there's sort of a storefront that will
from the
look out.
amenity spaces?
Yeah, that's correct.
So you're not going to be just walking between a
No.
blank wall and some piers?
Yeah, scroll
Jonathan,
scroll
what's
the
the
other
best
direction.
one?
Yeah, there you go.
This in here.
Yeah.
All right, so those are windows. Okay. And you're saying that the westernmost of those doors is the accessible entrance to the first floor? Or
Bill,
is
is-
the-
or maybe
Scroll down and
Jonathan.
just bring up that more detailed plan. Thanks. Yep. There we go. So yes, the westernmost door is the.
Okay.
I think if you zoom in a little bit, Tom, the clarity gets, at least from my screen, gets better. There you go.
Okay, so if you're in the accessible parking space, you'll have a fob or some way to get in that door.
That's correct.
If you live there, and you can come in that way. All right. Okay.
It's all a little unusual in the sense that, you know, two parking spaces is atypical for this many apartments in a sense. So
Yeah. Bruce?
Good question to ask while this plan's up. The bike storage, is there any intention to provide charging for electric e-bikes and so forth in there? And I ask that because I understand that at the moment there's some concern about the instability of these batteries and so forth. And so is it possible to put bike charging in there without improving the fire rating of the walls there, enclosing it, for example?
I have to say we have not gotten to that level of detail. In my head, at least, we were designing it around your typical human powered bike, not an electric powered bike.
But the folks who live here without cars, I'm going to guess, are going to be perhaps a strong market for e-bikes than average. And this is also nice and secure, which is another thing that e-bikes would want. If you've got this valuable bike, you would like to have a place like this to store it. So it really is, the dominoes are leaning towards e-bikes, I thought. And so I'm just asking whether that might be a feature that is provided And hopefully it can be done so, or I mean, at least from a regulatory standpoint.
Yeah, good point, Bruce. All right, I'm going to go back to the member of the public with the phone number only and see if we can bring them in and give them an opportunity to speak again. So Mr. or Mrs. 413-549-0810, let's try to bring that person over to allow them to speak. And Tom, you can stop your share for the moment. All right, welcome to the planning board. Please give us your name and your address.
My name is Vincent O'Connor. I live at 175 Summer Street in Amherst. And I have a number of declarative statements, and I'll be happy to clarify them after I make them. And I think the first thing I would say is that the somewhat Rube Goldberg nature of the parking and vehicular access issues could give the planning board pause about rendering its approval. With respect to affordable units, rather than accept cash, my view is since the developer, the applicant, has other units within town, some under construction, others already constructed, that the board require that the applicant make available on a one-for-one basis. At the same time, if the building is granted an occupancy permit, that the units, that the affordable units in other buildings owned by the person be made available for as affordable units, and not have it be done by cash. If this were a different situation, the cash issue might be the only way to do it. But this is not, and the owner has plenty of other units in town that he could set aside as affordable and make available on the very same day when the occupancy permit is granted. On issues regarding rainfall and so forth, I would urge the board to look at the standards, the former standards, the one that are being referred to now, and make a judgment about whether they should order more. If you know that within the lifetime of the building, there's going to have to be an upgrade, I think the board is absolutely within its power to order that the drainage be sufficient to cover the lifetime of the building. Additionally, I have other views about downtown buildings, looking to the future rather than just to the immediate present related to the university's need for housing for students. That in fact, in downtown buildings, the bottom two floors should be required to be built to commercial use standards. And that would mean make it the second floor available for commercial use in the future. And I would say that the Jones building on Coles Road, the one on the north side of Coles Road, the only building of theirs there that's newly built, they regretted not having built the second floor for commercial use, because they had people wanting to use it, but they couldn't because the second and third floors of that building, the three-story building, were built only for residential use standards.
Mr. O'Connor, your time has elapsed. If you could.
I have more to say that's not a repetition of anything, and that are substantial comments to. I've been listening on this phone for 2.5 hours, and I will not repeat myself or repeat something that somebody else has said, and I would request that the board allow me to present the information, the concerns that I have.
I will give you 2 more minutes.
Okay, I have not heard anything about the level of energy efficiency of the building, and maybe I missed it, but solar access, so forth. The 4-bedroom issue, I would say repair to Kendrick Place and the Jones Building on Coles Road. They have had, both have had troubles renting out the 4-bedroom units, and quite frankly, the board needs to prohibit the owner from renting out the individual bedrooms in these 4 bedrooms or any other bedroom as essentially and running a rooming house when you have approved an apartment building. And that is being done in town completely out in the open. And the other concern that I didn't hear about was a serious flaw in the Kendrick Place building where the enclosed stairwell, fire safety stairwell and so forth, instead of opening to the outside, opens into the lobby. The building commissioner, when I made comments about that, he said that the board had, in that case, had tied his hands and that he was unable to order a different means of egress. I do not think that a safety enclosed stairwell should be exiting into the lobby of the building, that it should exit to the outside, and as it does in some of the other buildings that have been built since.
All right, you have 15 seconds.
Yes, and I would say that I do not agree that that in essence the upper limit prescribed by the zoning bylaw should in fact be the lower limit, and that the board would have to justify doing something other than the upper limit. I think I have not heard I don't really agree with the 5-story building.
Okay,
I think
all right.
2 commercial floors and
I'm gonna cut
and
you
2
off.
residential floors would be more appropriate.
Thank you. Okay, so board members, anything else you want to share? Anything else you want to say with the design team this evening? Bruce?
There's a couple of things in the development application reports that was circulated that we might want to mention. I think we're clearly headed towards a continuation here, but for example, the staff say that we should have clarification on the ground plane location so that we get an average finished grade. In other words, there should be some I would imagine diagrammatic or computational support for how we are measuring the height for the building. I think we asking for anyway, it's pushing the boundary, and so we should make sure that height computation is clinically documented. I think that's what the development report is asking, and I mention that only because apparently it hasn't yet been so, and I think rather than bringing it up at the next meeting, it would be good to do it now so that it's done. And
Bruce, I see Chris's hand go up. She may have a comment about that.
Sure.
Yeah, I was unaware that Mr. Reedy had provided that information, and so we do have it, and it looks correct. The building commissioner hasn't looked at it as far as I know, but we will do that before the next meeting. So thank you, Mr. Colden, for bringing that up. But I think that we have the information that we need now, and I think Pam has put it in the packet.
Okay.
Yes, I have to say I only get my packets online, and I wasn't able to find the DRB report in the packet online, and I haven't seen anything from the fire department. So it seems that folks that have their packets nailed to the back door of the town hall are doing better than I am.
Well, that's a change.
So, so I think I'll go through that DRB and see what, because quite a lot of it has been answered in the conversation and so forth. And if there's anything that that I think might need some preparation, I guess I could email it to you, Chris, and you could forward it to the applicant. So I guess we don't really need to go through it anymore.
Well, I mean, Chris, I assume you've shared this draft DR development report with Mr. Reedy and the design team?
We have shared it. There was some mix-up last week. I'm not exactly sure what it was, but it turned out that some people who got paper packets got more information than people who got electronic packets, but I think we've got that straightened out now, and the electronic packets do contain everything. And so we apologize for a little bit of a mix-up, but I think we have more information now than we had when I wrote the development application report.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So we could go through that draft that you prepared and make sure we've touched on each of your questions. Mr. Reedy, wouldn't that make sense to do this evening so that you've gotten the fullest conversation this evening you can get?
We'd appreciate that.
All right. All right. So I guess before I start, Janet, your hand is up. Is there something you'd like to say before we start through the development application report?
Well, I kind of think, I mean, it seems like we're gonna go to another meeting anyway, because we don't have anything from the town engineer. For me, the outstanding issues would be the affordable housing, the inclusionary zoning units, whether they should be in the building. I would love to hear from the Housing Trust their thoughts on that. And then also, if this building is like 22, units with, I don't know, 75 students, that brings up the issue of having on-site management 24 hours, which is a requirement we've had for other, buildings that have admitted or are intended to be for students. And so I don't, I think that's an issue that we need to discuss. I don't think we need to discuss it tonight, but I think those are things I see that are on the hook in terms of what I'm, concerned about. So.
Well, Janet, my memory is that we talked about the on-site supervision in the projects on Olympia Drive, which is in the, I forget if it's called the fraternity zone or whatever the zoning is, where it's explicitly limited to student housing.
I think
And
11 East Pleasant, we also required it. I'm pretty sure.
I don't think so.
But I
mean, certainly when I walk by that building, there is no staff person at a front desk.
I thought there was somebody living there, but maybe I should double check. But
yeah,
I think that's an issue to talk about. Like if there's 88 students there, as Karen has said, things can go wrong very quickly and usually on a weekend. So those are issues I think we need to discuss. I don't think we should maybe go tonight because it's on.
Okay, well, I guess, I think Tom was clear that this is a market development, and whoever responds to the market offering, it's not automatic that it would be all students, but it certainly could be the majority. We're not far from the police department. So anyway.
And they're busy on a Saturday night. Yeah. So I'm just sort of, issues to discuss at our next meeting. So.
Bruce?
For the record, I think I should say that my observation earlier applied to the apartment layouts in the new building. There are 5 apartment layouts in the older building, which are far more, what you might say, family appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right, so let's see, maybe does everybody have the development application report that they can look at, or do we need to put it on the screen? I guess if anybody wants it on the screen, you can raise your hand, and otherwise I'll just sort of work with my paper copy, Bruce, and see what we want to talk about here. So First, first page is the request and the project data, not having had any previous permitting on this site. Much of the second page has to do with the dimensional requirements, and Chris has highlighted the issue about the building height, which I guess is now basically moot. Continues with a project description. The site, third page, site visit and waivers. Traffic impact statement has been requested as a waiver. That's still the case, right, Tom?
Correct.
Okay. Then under issues, we have architecture, a description of the architecture, issues, mechanical equipment. Do we want a detail of the screening? Obviously, Jonathan's package had a section through the screening. And I guess if members want any more detail on that, we should have that, you should raise that comment. Chris?
That detail I didn't have. I may have
When-
had it,
when
but
you
I
wrote
didn't
this.
know I had it when I wrote the report. So
Okay.
now we have it. So if you need more, you can ask for that.
All right. The next question you had was about the parapet on the stair and elevator tower. And the fact that the parapet on that section of the building is higher. Chris at least is asking whether it ought to be lowered.
I think that
Jonathan,
may have also been one of the partial questions from the DRB too. I think there was some back and forth on that.
Yeah, I mean, I assume you did that for architectural reasons to make it to distinguish it from the rest of the new building.
That is correct.
All right.
That was a conscious choice.
And how much does that higher parapet contribute to the higher building height that you are asking permission for?
It doesn't, as the way we've understood the definition, that's to the highest point of the roof. But items like parapets, screen fencing, penthouses don't count towards that.
Okay. All right. How will the ground floor doors on the west and north side of the building be prevented from staying open? Will they have some sort of
They'll be alarmed.
monitoring alarm,
Yes,
or monitored that they're open, and somebody ought to come and pay attention to that?
Yes.
All right. I think the next comment had to do with the residential support spaces, and you've now labeled the plans more than we originally saw. So I think that's been taken care of. Site improvements, description of site improvements. I'm going to page 4. Issues to consider: should the proposed bench on the south side of the building match the new benches installed on the common? Maybe when you come back, you ought to have some cuts for the benches and the bike, the bike racks, and if there are any outside. I think there are.
There is at least one outside.
So that we have a little more complete picture of the site accessories, if I can call it that. And then are the concrete pavers going to be installed on a concrete bed to keep them from heaving? I think at least when you do bricks, you often have at least a bituminous, if not a concrete setting bed underneath it.
Here we won't, Mr. Chair.
Here we would like to have a stone bed so that we can adjust them and make sure they stay level. Barry has a similar series of ramps in the cinema building that he did out of pavers. We're looking at a larger format paver this time, but they've stayed nice and level. Again, like this, they'll be covered. So
okay. So coordination of the bike rack locations between the drawings. Oh, here's the request for the details on the rack and the bench and the handrails.
Yep.
Concrete walls and the screening, which we already have. Historical Commission, yes, we know. Tom started with that description. Landscape plan, I'm going to page 5. Issues to consider: have a more detailed landscape plan for the number and species of plants. I will ask if are any of the plants that are proposed, are they considered invasive or are they by and large native plants that are considered benign?
As far as we know, we have not included anything that's invasive. The screening right around the transformer is called out as Inkberry Holly, which I believe is a native, North American native. The bed closest to the door has rhododendrons in it. Some rhododendrons are native, some are not.
Okay. And what about irrigation? Are any of the beds proposed to be irrigated?
Not yet, but
yeah,
we'll put a yard hydrant in, so there'll be irrigation there.
Uh-huh. Oh, and then there's a question about potentially having some shade tolerant plantings on the north side of the building. Do we have space for that, or do you need to keep that hardscape?
I think I would tend to keep it hardscape. I think people are going to transit through those areas. That's at least my take on it.
Yeah, and I think as a practical matter, you're on the north side of the. I mean, I don't know that those plants are going to survive, even if they're shade tolerant, given where they were going to be. So I think hardscape there makes the most sense.
All right, lighting plan. Will the lights on the exterior be motion activated, or do they have a time at which they will be turned off? It sounds like you'll probably be on at least either a light sensor or a timer to go
Correct.
from roughly dawn to dusk,
Yes,
or dusk to dawn.
dusk to dawn.
Okay, a question about the lighting levels on the north and the west sides, that they appear to be actually pretty high. You know, I don't remember exactly the numbers that were in that area. I did see some pretty high numbers, I think, on the south side. You know, we have had projects where we thought that the lighting was actually too intense and that it might be better to be slightly less. Bruce?
They're about 10 lumens, I think, or foot candles, that's much the same. And that's I mean, inside that would be a corridor lighting level, a low corridor lighting level. So outside but I think that in that location, particularly on the north side, and I think it's channeled between walls. So I think that level of lighting would make one feel secure in a space that I know, having walked around there these days at night, you know, particularly when I was leaving my office late and walking around to the cinema or something like that, I used to use that passageway quite a lot after dark. And this is why I'm looking forward to having a brighter. So I think the lighting level is actually a generous allocation that would probably be appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the lighting levels are at their brightest, kind of where, as Bruce said, you know, between the cinema and our building or this proposed project, you know, they drop off as you get towards the adjoining buildings along Main Street.
Mm-hmm. Do you think you'll end up with a camera back there?
You know, we haven't talked about that yet, but it wouldn't surprise me. It's certainly around those doors, you know, it's another way to, you know, other than an alarm going off to kind of know if someone's propped the doors open or if someone's, you know, building a nest back there someplace.
Right. Well, it might be worth considering. Okay, more on the lighting. Let's see. Nope, that was everything on the lighting. Erosion, will there be additional erosion control around the perimeter of the site to prevent siltation of surrounding properties during excavation and construction? I'm not sure Chris, what you mean by additional. I assume there will be whatever's required to control the site during construction.
They really just showed protection of the catch basins as far as I could tell. So I wondered if there was something more that needed to be done or should be done around the perimeter of the site, maybe the team could look at that and, just think about whether that's needed or not, and then come back with an answer next time.
Okay, good. Utilities, I guess. Okay, so then location of the electrical meters, we might want to know where that is. Some concern about the trenching for utilities. And that maybe there would be more site trenching than you've suggested.
So
And-
may I talk about that one for a minute?
Sure, Chris.
It looked like that they were only going to repair or replace the sidewalk that goes across the driveway and whatever is in front of the existing building. But in fact, they're trenching through that bump out. And I think on the site visit, Barry agreed that yes, he would be rebuilding that bump out, but I think it needs to show on the plan that that is going to be rebuilt and not just, left in a kind of patchwork fashion.
Okay. I assume everyone else understands what the bump out is, because I actually don't, but if you all do, that's fine. I don't need to have it explained to me. Okay, drainage. Okay, we have talked about the drainage, and I think Tom and Barry, you probably ought to recognize. I think there's some concern. I think a little more, another catch basin or two would probably be much appreciated. Let's see. Drainage from the canopy. Jonathan, I assume at some point you'll have a downspout or.
I think we're going to bring it back to an internal drain, and
You'll have an internal.
and it'll go into the same drainage that the upper roof will go into.
Okay.
So I don't want the risk of something backing up or spilling off the edge and then icing up on the tail end of that ramp. So
okay.
on the stair.
All right. So that would be good to at least give us your strategy on the graphics.
Yep.
Parking. We talked about the EV parking station. Who will use them? It sounds like we don't really know yet, do we? But I think if there's any way to elaborate a little bit on the management plan about how you intend to manage those, I think that would be appreciated. And then will the applicant provide information for tenants on where to find parking downtown? I assume is that a flyer, Chris, that the town produces that landlords can then provide to their tenants when they sign the lease?
We have a map showing where parking is available downtown, and I think the library is passing that out to their to the users of the library, and they've come up with a kind of elaborate explanation of the fact that they've got so many buses going by and what routes they are and different things. If Tom would like me to do that, I can send him a copy of the library's parking management plan, which includes all this information. So I will do that.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that might be something that if in your spare time, Chris, if the town had a publication like that would be great. Bruce, I see your hand. Did I pass by something you wanted to comment on?
Well, I think Barry's lease that we were given, which I can't say I read, but I skimmed through it, and there's a number of things on page 16 that the lessee acknowledges receipt, and one of them is a parking or could be a parking plan. It's not, but on page 22 there is a statement that that the parking plan is being. So there seems to be references in the lease document that the landlord intends that the tenant acknowledge receipt of a parking plan. At least that's what it says on page 22. It should probably also say it on page 16. So I think it sounds like they're actually doing that.
Okay, thank you for looking at that. Okay, I'm on page 7. The A&R plan. Is that something that'll be coming at some point soon, Tom, or does it not need to happen until you've got drawings farther along?
I think the latter, so we would accept the condition of approval that prior to receipt of a building permit, we receive an endorsement of an A&R.
Okay, yeah, Chris, that would be good for us to note when we're putting together conditions. Okay, so then about the inclusionary zoning and the affordable units, the request to make the payment in lieu. Tom, have you had any conversations with the Housing Trust at this point?
Not yet, but I know they meet next Thursday night, and I had reached out to Nate Malloy, and he had suggested that we get on the agenda. I think Nate's on this call, so hopefully we'll be there next Thursday to have that conversation with the trust and to come back to this board. You know, ideally, we're back on the 20th and having this conversation, hopefully for approval that evening, so.
Right. Yeah, it'd be helpful to know their position, whether it comes probably directly from them to Chris, preferably. Bruce.
I hesitate to ask this, but because I know Barry, I think I will. I also know Vince. And we don't usually or necessarily respond to public comment, but sometimes we do. And on this one, I guess I would like to ask Barry whether he thought that Vince O'Connor's idea that people who are established developers in town could be not expected to, but asked to do something along the lines of Vince suggested. Does Barry think that's a good idea? Or is this something that should be discouraged and that we should simply rely on what the actual bylaw says in Article 15, which is that there's a formula for doing this? But it was a question, and I would be interested, since we have the horse here in the room, to ask whether this is a good idea or not.
Yeah, I get Barry, before you respond, I wanted to say, I went through my head that even though Barry's involved in both of these, you know, in this project and other projects, the actual ownership may differ across projects, so that it may not be quite as easy to move the chess pieces around as we think. So
Well, I
Barry,
suspect that that's true, and that's why I thought, because that's probably, the people listen to these things and they watch them and so forth. I think it would be good to put this to bed if there is a bed in which to put it.
Okay, all right, Barry.
I think you're right. One of the problems is that all the projects don't have the same partners. I mean, I happen to be lead in most of them, but they're not the same partners. It might be something that we'd be able to work out in this instance if it came to that. I think we're very interested to go to the meeting with the Housing Trust Fund and really talk with them and see what they believe is the most important. I would make a comment about Vince's comment about, if it's all right with you, Mr. Chair,
Certainly.
about preparing the second floor for commercial. As you know, or as I know, and Jonathan knows, the codes to develop for commercial and residential are completely different. So it's very expensive to prepare for commercial on the second level and then use it for residential. I mean, you have to have cast iron and copper plumbing as opposed to plastic and PVC. So those, I really don't think the market is calling for that. I think the market is more calling for residential units. And I'm fine with putting commercial on the first level.
Okay. Chris, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to mention another reason that it would be difficult to transfer the affordable unit requirement from one property to another, because each property has its own decisions. And in those decisions is written how many affordable units and at what level of affordability that particular project is required to have. And so if you tried to move, affordable units from one project to another, you'd end up having to redo the permitting or modify the permitting on the project to which the units were going. So it's more complicated than it seems on the face of it.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I can say as a member of CPAC this past season, I think they came to CPAC looking for about $500,000 in funding to continue their work. And I'm sure I expect, I'm not sure, but I expect that they would be pleased to have this influx of money. But I think it's an interesting conversation with them about whether they'd like to have some money in hand to do kind of for them to decide what happens, or whether they'd prefer to just see 3 or 4 more units happen in town soon. So, okay, special permit, I'm on page 8, related to lot coverage. So this would be a finding. You were saying, Tom, that the reduction in non-conforming lot coverage is not detrimental.
Substantially more detrimental, yes.
All right. How many adjectives and negatives can we put in one sentence? Right?
Get those lawyers in a room, right?
Don't do it. Okay. Moving farther down, the mixed-use building. The 30% mixed use, and you know, I think we will want to see, if it's not already on the drawings, Jonathan, we will want to see some actual calculations with a stamp at some point that you are over that 30% number. And in terms of the 50% dwelling units, it looks like you are under the 50%, and maybe that's this comment just came because Chris didn't have your summary at the time she did this draft. Construction logistics, I'm on page 9. Sign plan, traffic impact. Issues for traffic. Board may wish to consider the issue of pedestrians crossing the driveway access and whether it is necessary to install signs to indicate that traffic may be entering or exiting the driveway. I guess Tom or Jonathan or even Philip, is there any thoughts about that? Based on the small number of parking spaces, I'd be hard pressed to say that the traffic's going to be changing much, and whether we have an increased need for signage is.
I would
If
say that there's
anything,
a reduced number of transits across that sidewalk. There's more parking behind the building today than there will be after the development. So, but
all right, Janet.
So on that issue, I wondered if like a change in the surface for somebody walking by would kind of alert them that something's different. Because, you know, those are kind of funky little exits and entryways, and, you know, I've been walking along and been a little startled to see a car there. So I wonder if there was some way, I don't know if it's paint or it's some kind of change in surface. So as you're walking, you sort of stop and say, oh, it's different.
Will the public sidewalk be reconstructed in front of the project?
Yes.
It will. Okay. So maybe the surface treatment is something to consider as you come back with a little more detail on the site. Karen.
So I'm thinking that in the future, there's going to be really a lot of electric bicycles. And if you're going to have any kind of families, there'll be bigger electric bicycles where children can be in the back. So there's that, also that traffic coming from the storage area where I think I talked to Barry about the charging stations, and he mentioned that there would be charging stations for electric bicycles. I think we have to realistically say that we're moving in that direction probably pretty fast. And as far as traffic goes, I'm a big proponent of having these things be marked on the sidewalk so that you have sort of bicycle lanes kind of clear on the sidewalk. But that's another thing. But think of I don't think you need signage here, but consider that there's also bicycles, not just these two cars that are there.
Okay, good point.
Mhm.
All right. And then going farther down to the bottom of the page, yes, we still need town engineer review. And work within the town right of way will need to be, or may need to be approved by the town council. So I assume you will coordinate any of that with Chris.
Yes.
All right, so that's the full draft. If nobody, does anybody have further comments that we want to make this evening? We've exhausted you all.
It's true.
Karen, is your hand for
No,
another comment?
great, sorry.
Okay. All right. In that case, the time now is 9:32. Oh, Bruce, go ahead. You are muted. Bruce, you are muted.
Well, still a slow learner. I think about to support my motion for a continuation by examining the date and time. But I will move for continuation with the date and time.
Okay. I know that's fine, Karen. But we need to nail down the details for you guys. Tom, you mentioned March 20th, 2 weeks from tonight, our next meeting. Chris, does that work for you?
I think it works for us if I can get Pam to agree to that. Yep. Yep. Okay.
Okay, and do we want to do that at 6:35 or, I mean, as the first item, the first substantive item on the agenda?
That sounds good.
Yes.
Yep.
All right, so Bruce and Karen, we would amend your motion to be to continue to March 20th at 6:35 p.m. If you are in support of that. I see a thumbs up from Bruce. I see a thumb and a shaking from Karen. So, all right, so that's the motion on the floor. Any comments from the board before we run through a motion to continue? A vote yes is to continue and a vote no is to keep going this evening. All right, so Bruce, we'll go ahead with a roll call. Bruce?
I vote yes.
And Janet?
Yes.
All right. Johanna?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
And I'm an I as well. So that's, I guess, 5 members in favor, 2 members absent. Thank you, Mr. Reedy. Thank you, Mr. Roberts, and your team. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
See you soon. Thank you very much.
All right, good night.
Good night.
Okay, the time now is 6:34, and we'll go on to the next item in the agenda. That is old business regarding our site plan and special permit, site plan review and special permit for the new Fort River Elementary School. Chris, do you want to introduce this, or how would you like to proceed?
Sure, I would be happy to introduce it. There was a question about, I think I sent out some potential conditions, and when you reviewed the conditions last time you were talking about the Fort River School, you came upon one that had to do with screening of mechanical units on the roof. And the applicant who is here, Tim Cooper, he's on behalf of Danisco, and Rick Rice is also here, and Donna Danisco, and Kathy Shane, and I'm sorry that you had to wait so long. But in any event, they said that they hadn't included screening of the mechanicals on the roof because they didn't think they would be seen from really from anywhere. But then the board, questioned that. And so we came up with a potential condition of anything that's within 25 feet of the edge of the roof should be screened, and anything beyond that doesn't need to be screened. But then when we presented that to the board members via email, Ms. McGowan said that she thought that this really should be discussed in public. So we're bringing it to you to discuss it in public, and hope that you will come to an agreement about what needs to be
Right.
done. And I do understand that they didn't include the cost estimate for a lot of screening of mechanicals within their cost estimate for the project, and so that's of a concern to the people on that team. I think that's an explanation. Yep.
Chris, would you mind reading the condition that you were proposing?
Oh, you would ask that. Let's see. Do I have that?
I didn't find it in
I think I
the-
do. Yes, here it is.
Oh, good.
The one that we proposed was all air conditioning units and other mechanical equipment that is located within, it should have said, 25 feet of the edge of the roof shall be screened. Such equipment that is located more than 25 feet from the edge of the roof, i.e. in the middle of the roof, is not required to be screened. So that was the condition that we circulated as the alternative to condition 14 as we reviewed it on that evening.
Mhm. Okay. All right. So yeah, I think one of the concerns that we had was that this, whether we were giving special treatment to a town project as opposed to other projects. Board members, how do you feel about this condition? I will say that personally, given the renderings that were sent, the fact that I can see some mechanical equipment from 600 feet away seems pretty unobjectionable to me, even if it were a commercial project. And I do think that the view from the public way is what we need to value the most. So how do other people feel? Bruce?
Doug, I agree with you. I don't need to say more than that, I don't think.
Okay. Other board members, if we were to have a motion to adopt the condition that Chris has drafted, what kinds of comments would you have? Janet?
I have a question for the designers. Like, does that condition work for you? How does that impact the location of the mechanicals?
Okay, all right. Chris, I assume you proposed it after talking with Danisco and the OPM, probably, maybe even Kathy, about, and that it was that I assumed it was acceptable to that team. Is that true?
Yes, I sent that condition with the blanks, and I asked Tim Cooper to fill in the blank as to what he would be comfortable with, and he said 25 feet would be reasonable for him. So that's what he proposed, and that's what I just read to you.
Okay.
You do have images. I think Tim might have even prepared some more images. I don't know whether you want to look at images of the mechanical equipment screened tonight, or whether you're happy with that condition.
Okay. Tim, is there some material that you've presented and you would actually like to share with us?
We have presented or prepared a few images that will further illustrate what you will see and where you can see
Okay.
it from. And if you
Well,
want to look at it, I'm
why
happy
don't
to
you
share
go
it.
ahead why don't you go ahead and show that, and that way at least whatever members of the public are still with us can see what we probably received in our packets.
One second.
And Johanna and Bruce will come back to you after he shows these images.
Maybe I can just say that perhaps while this is coming up, I should have said that since the last meeting, I've been appointed to the school building committee. I don't know whether that's I don't think it's a conflict of interest, but it probably should be stated as a member declaration.
Okay, thank you, Bruce, and congratulations.
So on the screen now, you can see the roof plan superimposed on the site plan. And the typical equipment that we're talking about is located within the center of the roof. There are 4 major pieces of equipment.
Those are the sort of dark gray rectangles that were visible on the roof. Okay.
Those are the dark gray rectangles. They're air handlers over the gym, on the 3rd floor high roof and here to the eastern edge of the building. And those pieces of equipment are more than 25 feet away from the roof edge. The language was shared with us by Chris Brestrup, and it meets the current condition. What this diagram shows is that we do include in the current design screening that will block the equipment visually, looking from the west, which is the way bus traffic, people entering from the public way, many of the users will approach the building, and also approaching from the northwest through the parking lot, the way parents dropping off at school. We also included some visuals of what these pieces of equipment actually are. They are self-contained units with all of the mechanical equipment inside. They're typically matte, close to sky colored boxes. We don't know the exact color because this is a public project, so we have to give 3 or equals to meet public bidding laws. But this is generally what you're looking at. It is depending on the manufacturer, the sizes can vary a little bit, but this particular one, which is the basis of the design for 3 pieces of equipment, is 7 foot 6 feet tall, and then it will be mounted on a curb. So the total height from the roof will be in the neighborhood of 10 feet. And then the other type is this, another manufacturer, a slightly different type of machinery, but a similar configuration of a matte painted box with some ductwork coming out of it. The exact configuration of that ductwork we don't know, because we don't know until we'll know which submitted which equipment we are using. And then we just wanted to illustrate what would be required if we were to totally visually screen all of the equipment from anywhere on the site. We're not including a screen to the west because that's essentially wooded land on the east of the Fort River site until you get a considerable distance from the site. We don't think anyone will be able to see the equipment from the east side of the building. But if we were to add screening where the red lines are dashed, which would be new in addition to what is already provided in the project, there'd be a couple of impacts. One, a decent amount of the PV solar generation on the roof would be impacted and would have to be moved. Not just the areas that are directly impacted by the added screen, which are the blue rectangles around on all of the roof surfaces, but there is also shadow created by them. If the screens are tall enough to completely block the equipment, they would be about 10, 11 feet tall. So they have a subsequent shadow, which takes some of the PV that we have shown here out of the picture. And then there's also a cost. We happen to have a pretty good number of what this would be if we were to place more screen in kind, because at DD we actually eliminated some of this screen wall. So all in total, you're looking at about 340 linear feet of screen wall, and with markups, it's about $300,000 for the project to add this. So we just wanted to have that as context for this discussion. And then if you're interested, we have a little bit more modeling from the site that will show you exactly what you'll be able to see in the 3D models that I can share. The equipment is rendered as bright red, so it's perfectly clear what it is, but in real life it would not be. But this is just an illustrative model. Give me 1 second, I'll pull that up. So this is the path that a parent dropping off at the school would take. You started back at the public way, but now you're coming into the parking lot, driving south through approaching the building. So you can see the rooftop equipment is there. We've painted it red, so there's no mistake that you will be able to see it. But it is, you know, as the images just shared, it is a box on the roof, and if we were to build a mechanical screen all the way around it, it would be significantly more visible.
At this point, presumably you're actually looking forward and
If you were driving, hopefully you would be.
driving, right?
There are kids, yes. But for the sake of this conversation, we are a passenger in the car, and
Yes.
we are looking at the building.
Okay.
And so here we are, not fully back, but almost to the northern end of the athletic fields. And so that is that 600-foot number that you mentioned before that was included in the previous materials that were emailed after this discussion came up.
Mhm.
And one more, since it addresses a specific question. At the very northern edge of the property, at the public way, and in truth, there would probably be some trees that are at the property line obscuring your view from this point. You are considerably north of the entrance drive. But if we were to move along the northern edge of the property line, north of the walking path, north of the athletic fields, looking at the building, you know, you are some 650, 700 feet away from the building. So you're looking at a very oblique angle, but you can see the equipment, and we've made it red here to make it pop against the building. And there are buildings to the north, a couple of parcels that, you know, we have no intention of saying that you won't see the equipment, but there it is.
So we didn't talk a lot about the colors of the building itself. Is it, you know, from this distance, it feels like if the units and the ductwork were all basically a color that was compatible with the rest of the building, it would simply be, you know, those are the bumps on the top of the building. Are you expecting to have that, you know, given that they probably won't be painted red?
They,
you know,
they will not be painted red. Typically manufacturers, for the equipment themselves, it's a neutral matte color that basically blends in with the sky. And then some things that you may see in addition to the equipment itself are the ductwork that comes out, which is usually not at the top, it's lower. We can't give you a fully accurate representation of how much of that you would see. And you certainly would not see it anywhere close to the building at all. You would have to be very far back, as far back as you are here.
okay.
And that we clad in roofing material, which would be neutral and in the character of the rest of the building.
Right. Okay, Johanna, and then after that, Janet, or maybe Bruce.
Thank you. I was just you had asked the question of whether we felt comfortable, and I just wanted to say that I had responded to Chris and said I felt comfortable with the 25-foot distance. And then I really appreciate the added explanation from the designers about what additional screening would entail. I think it is definitely not worth losing the rooftop solar capacity or the $300,000. So those are my thoughts.
Okay, thanks for that opinion. Bruce?
Karen was before me.
I wasn't, my hand just went up, but briefly, I agree totally with what Joanna said.
Okay, all right. And
So,
Bruce?
but most especially, I wanted to thank Tim for this very thorough present, no holds barred. I mean, painting the damn thing red, for God's sake. I have to say, it's probably borderline sacrilegious, but I saw the Pompidou Center in Paris as it was being constructed, and I talked to a lot of people, Parisians at the time, and they didn't like it at first, but now it's one of their treasured buildings, and it's been repainted, and God damn it, they did it the same way. So you can love the stuff, but we probably will never get to it because, frankly, we really never hardly see the damn things.
Yeah.
So thanks, Tim. That was wonderful. I enjoyed the trip, but you've just made me more emphatically supportive of the condition that Chris drafted.
Okay. All right, Janet.
So I agree with what people are saying. And Doug, I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking if it's light colored and match the building, it wouldn't cross your mind. So is it an easy fix just to paint it or just, or whatever? But I also think expecting not to see any mechanicals at 600 or 700 feet seems like a lot to ask. And so I'm fine.
Okay.
And I do appreciate that you made it red, because a lot of times when I look at these renderings, they're kind of, sometimes they're very sneaky in a way that favors the project. And you're like, that doesn't really, like something seems off, or you realize like the sizing and the trees are really huge and, whatever. And people are just really happy walking around all the time. And so this was like a very negative presentation that I appreciated.
It was neutral. Not, all right, so I think we've got a clear board majority that are fine with this condition, Chris.
You want to take a vote on it?
Yeah, I want to do that, but before I do that, I'm going to put Kathy on the spot. Kathy, as the head of our school building committee, but also as a town councilor, do you feel comfortable with us going ahead with this?
Absolutely, hearing that we're not having to put up more screening. I mean, Tim just quickly said that one of the trade-offs we made was to cut the costs of the building, but not hurt the building. We have more insulated windows rather than some screening up on the roof. I mean, there were a lot of efforts to keep the integrity. And I think one of the exciting things about this building is it is a net zero. And so what you're going to see is you're going to have solar panels on the roof, and this equipment is not burners, it's not oil fuel. So it's sort of a statement. So absolutely, I'm delighted that we're not having to spend $300,000 and remove panels. for thing. And the other thing, just people should know, we have the first salvo, the initial site preparation is March 26th is the celebration of it, and that bid came in substantially under what we had estimated. So there is more money in the project, but there's potentially savings along the way, so it's toward the building. So it's terrific that you're not increasing the costs of something that almost no one will even know is there. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It does make me wonder if you're going to save $300,000 at some point. So, okay. All right, so why don't we go through a vote? I think we need a motion to, let's see, we already have a motion and it's already seconded, right? Wasn't that Bruce and Karen? Or was that an
think
early?
so. I think that was previously.
Okay, that was an earlier one. I guess it's been a long enough night already.
That was the continuation, but
Oh yeah, okay, all right. So in that case,
I'll move
Bruce, you want to do another one, or do you want me to do it?
Sure. I'll move that we support the condition as proposed by the planning director.
Okay, I'll second that. All right, we'll do a roll call vote unless anybody else wants to raise their hand again. All right, going from the end of the alphabet, Karen.
Aye.
All right, Johanna.
Aye.
Janet.
Aye.
Bruce.
Aye.
And I'm an aye as well. Okay. All right, great. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, all three of you from Danisco. We look forward to the, I guess, did you say it was a groundbreaking in March or the start of the project of some sort?
The initial site preparation, March 26, 3:30
Okay,
at Fort River.
all right. Thank you. Thank you all for staying through most of the evening before we got to you.
Thank you.
All right. So. Let's see, I lost my agenda here. Here we go. Okay. All right, Chris, continuing, I guess I'll say the time is now 9:56. Chris, any other old business not reasonably anticipated?
None.
All right, how about new business not reasonably?
I don't think so. Nate was going to bring something up. Oh, he's here.
He has been.
He was going
yeah.
to say something about something under
All
new
right, Nate,
business.
anything you want to say?
There he is.
I don't think so. Not at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, okay. All
Thanks.
right, so next is Form A&R subdivision.
We do not have any.
All right, ZBA.
I haven't received any transmittals, so I have nothing to report.
Okay, SPP, SPR, SUB.
We do have one. Pam, do you want to describe it? Because you know more about it.
Well, let's see. The Emily Dickinson Museum is working to submit a site plan review application. They want to rebuild the carriage house on the Evergreens. So we have most of that together. And we will do a staff review of it and look for a hearing date, and we'll keep you aware.
Okay, great. Planning Board Committee and Liaison reports. Bruce, anything for PVPC?
No.
I have nothing for CPAC. Karen, anything for DRB?
No.
Chris, anything for CRC?
Yes, I'm starting to talk to them about the solar bylaw. So that should be kicking off, I think, March 26th.
Okay. Okay, next is report of chair. I really don't have anything, but Chris, I do want to ask, when do you think we will introduce the board to our design guidelines team and that process?
That's a good question. I'll have to work with Nate on that. I see he's
Okay.
still here. That might be a question for him.
Yeah, Nate, do you want to comment on when you think that team will be ready to talk to us?
Yeah, I'm not sure. We're trying to get stakeholder meetings. I was hoping for this week and at least next week to get those started. And then, they're hoping to do some existing conditions assessments. They've already been in town. I'd have to look at when they were planning to get in front of, certain boards, but, definitely, a number of members of the planning board were part of a stakeholder meetings. And so then, I don't know exactly, when in front of the planning board, but we're trying to get that going, like I said, in the next week or so.
Right. Janet, you had a comment?
I may have missed this because I missed a meeting. So who are the stakeholders? Or has that all been identified, or who are those who?
Nate?
They haven't. We're looking at a few different stakeholder groups. One is board and committee representatives. One is downtown, property owners and business owners. One is residents, and then there may be another one. And so each stakeholder group could have, 8 to 12 people. And then Dotson is hoping to have a working group of 25 to 30, maybe a few more people they'd meet with, about 6 times throughout the process. And they would just be a group that would advise Dodson in terms of, the process. So the stakeholder groups would meet initially to give comments without staff, and then they might meet one more time with Dotson. And then there's this working group that would be meeting, periodically throughout the process.
Do people volunteer for those things? Or like, is there someone they can contact to volunteer?
Yeah, we've been getting emails. So, I mean, if you send something to Chris or myself, or people are listening, they could.
Okay.
And I think Janet and Doug have already said that they wanted to be part of this, so we put your names down on the list of potential stakeholders, so you will be contacted. And I think Karen also said she was interested, so.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, well, that concludes my report of chair. Chris, anything on staff?
I have no report, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else want to offer anything that needs to be said at 10:01?
I was just say one other thing. Wayfinders is holding a community meeting over Zoom tomorrow night at 7 to talk about their affordable housing project on Belchertown Road and Southeast Street. And so they've already submitted their initial project eligibility letter to the state or the subsidizing agency to begin that comprehensive permit process. And so this public meeting is a chance to hear a presentation from them and then for the public to ask questions or comments of the project.
And that's tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night, yes.
Is that posted on our website?
It's on the community calendar. It's not sponsored by a board or committee. So it's been on the trust webpage and it was in the news online. They'll have other meetings, before they actually submit a comprehensive permit. They hope to have an in-person meeting or a site visit with people, but this is really just to get initial comments as part of this project eligibility phase.
Wasn't that ServiceNet that was part of, or is that another project?
Isn't that a different project?
It's a different project.
Different project.
Yeah.
That was 20 Belchertown Road. This is farther out.
Right. This is the town purchased 3 properties combined into one at 76 or so Belchertown Road. So it's a little so almost at the entrance to Colonial Village. And so there's about 45 units proposed there in a new building, and then 33 units or so proposed on Southeast Street with 6 studios being renovated in the old school building.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Janet?
I'm thinking that project will go to the ZBA for permitting, but it'd be nice to have them come to us and make a presentation for some input.
That usually happens after the application is received, so we haven't received the comprehensive permit application. And at that time, we would come to you and ask you if you wanted to review the project to make recommendations.
Yeah, we're thinking that the application probably won't be submitted until June or July.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we would, you don't even need to ask us if we want to see it. I think we want to see it.
Sure.
Yeah. Sounds very exciting.
Okay, so unless anybody has anything else, we can adjourn. The time is 10:04. Thanks all for sticking in for a what turned out to be a long meeting, but it seemed like we made good headway on the Barry Roberts project.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Are you sure you want to stop
See you, Pam.
recording? Yes.
Recording
Okay,
stopped.
good night, Mr. Marshall. See you soon.
Yep.